My boss demoted me, but still expected me to work just as hard as before. This happened a couple of years ago, but first I need to give a little background to set the scene. I grew up in a pretty poor family in the southern US. Despite that, I studied like crazy and earned a full scholarship to one of the top universities in the country, maybe even the world. I'm not trying to brag, it's just the truth. I realized early on that I absorb information fast, and it helps me work efficiently. And thanks to years spent collecting cans for money and working outside with my dad all day, I developed stubborn persistence and a strong work ethic. Being the oldest of 6 children, growing up in poverty also taught me to read people, their intentions, small cues, everything between the lines. In short, I was practically built for malicious compliance. After graduating from a great university, I moved back home to be close to my family and start my career. I also didn't care much for the Northeast, where my university was. It felt too gray and cold to me. I started with a crappy job just to get my foot in the door, then briefly worked at a startup. Eventually, I landed a position at a local government agency, earning almost double what I made before. The agency, well, specifically our county office, was notorious for insane turnover, awful coworkers, and an overall toxic and exhausting environment. Add to that the clients, who were often some of the most difficult people in the community, and the job drained every ounce of energy a person could have. But for a young guy, the salary felt good enough to deal with the pain. So when they offered me the job, I accepted, as cheerfully as someone can when walking straight into hell. I started in May. I worked my butt off from day one. I read the entire 350-page manual in my free time. I took on unpaid side tasks. I helped coworkers, even if it meant working more hours than I could handle. Sometimes I'd show up at 8 a.m. and wouldn't leave until 2 or 3 in the morning. I once had to cancel a long-planned date with my serious girlfriend because they called me in unexpectedly, and I stayed until late at night. I consistently worked far more than I wanted, but they just kept piling on work because I was performing well. My supervisor would always say things like, "That's just how things are here. It's for the good of the agency. The best employees are the ones who sacrifice themselves for everyone else." Outside of work, she seemed like a perfectly pleasant woman, but a small part of me grew more irritated every time I heard those lines. By June, only 1 month in, I was already looking for escape routes, just like all the talented people who quit before me. I reached out to an MBA program that had always interested me, and they told me I should apply. Within a couple of days, the program director contacted me personally and scheduled an interview. The interview lasted 15 minutes. He thanked me for my time and ended the Skype call. Before the week was over, I received an email offering me a full ride scholarship plus a small but very useful monthly stipend as long as I agreed to work as a graduate assistant for 20 hours a week during semesters. I was thrilled and signed the acceptance document immediately. Just like that, in under a week, I went from drowning under a growing mountain of stress to becoming a future graduate student. The program began in January, which gave me about 5 months. I decided I'd stick it out at the agency, save as much money as possible, and then leave in December. Since I'm an honest person, I told my supervisor about my plans and explained that I'd be resigning at the end of December because I'd been given an incredible MBA opportunity. She congratulated me, said she was glad for my success, and told me she'd think about the next steps and get back to me soon. A couple of weeks passed, each day draining me a little more, like a river slowly eroding its banks. Finally, she called me into her office for a meeting. She told me I could stay with the agency, but only if I agreed to move into what she called a contract position. She said they needed me to vacate my current role so they could open it as an official vacancy and prepare it for a new hire. She insisted that all of this was for the good of the agency, and that someone as principled, hardworking, and ethical as me would agree to such terms, and should agree to them. Remember those words, because they'll matter later. I asked what exactly would change, and she gave me a vague summary. That wasn't enough for me. She wasn't a terrible manager, but life taught me one rule: never sign anything unless you've personally read every line. So I requested a week to decide and asked for all documents detailing every change, benefits, duties, restrictions, everything. She promised to bring the paperwork the next day. And that's where the malicious compliance began. The following afternoon, she handed me 12 double-sided pages packed with text. Every page was filled with size 10 times New Roman, the kind of formatting that makes sentences blend into each other like wet ink. Even the most dedicated reader would fall asleep halfway through it. I read the packet that night, and with each page, my mood sank lower and lower. I was losing nearly every benefit except my accumulated overtime. My title was being reduced. Several privileges I had earned were simply gone. But halfway through, something changed. I suddenly sat up. I had found a tiny clause buried deep in legal sludge stating that under this new contract, I could not work more than 40 hours a week. I was forbidden from performing many of the tasks I had grown to despise. I was required to do only the duties explicitly listed in the new job description. In other words, once I hit 40 hours, I was done. No exceptions, no pitching in, no being a team player. As I reread that microscopic sentence, a slow smile crept across my face. At first it was small, the polite "I'm pretending to be interested" smile you give on a bad date. Then it grew wider and wider until I probably resembled the Grinch plotting to steal Christmas. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was so energized I barely slept. The next morning, I walked into the office prepared. My manager was delighted to hear I accepted the new contract. Of course, she had no idea how happy I actually was. After I handed her the signed pages, she began explaining what she wanted me to handle over the next 2 weeks. I quickly, but calmly, told her I wouldn't be able to do that. I explained that as a responsible and ethical employee, I must strictly follow my new contract. She stared at me, confusion mixing with anger, as I laid it all out. I could no longer perform several tasks I used to because the contract prohibited them. I could not work overtime under any circumstances unless my hours were officially recorded. Once I reached 40 hours, I was required to stop working immediately and go home. After-hours calls, emails, and messages, not allowed. Everything would have to wait until Monday at 8 a.m. I was no longer permitted to take on call shifts. They'd need to find someone else fast, which would be, challenging. I couldn't help coworkers the way I used to because I no longer had the authority, the time, or the legal right to do so. Her stare could have melted steel, and the longer I continued, the more intense it became. When I left her office, which was now seconds away from metaphorically exploding, I sat down and began drafting an email. Here's the thing. In my own position, you needed certified training before you were legally allowed to sign off on cases and documents. If you hadn't completed that training and anyone found out, attorneys could tear the agency apart. Because of the county's incompetence, I never got that training, yet they still had me doing a job from day one. Every request I made about it had been ignored. So I wrote the email. I addressed it to my former supervisor, the office manager, and the regional director, the usual trio who had ignored me before. But this time, I added 2 more recipients in the blind copy, the big boss from the central office and her even bigger boss. Networking and politeness, I practice them religiously. They pay off when it counts. I asked very respectfully when I would finally receive the mandatory training I had been promised months ago. I explained that I had been handling cases without the required certification and would have to continue doing so until my responsibilities were reassigned. 2 minutes later, I received a reply from the highest-ranking official in the entire state agency.
She expressed that she was saddened and disturbed to hear about my situation and promised she would personally ensure I completed the required training. She was also shocked that I had essentially been forced to accept a demotion just to keep my job. As a result, she guaranteed that under no circumstances would my salary be reduced. The most amusing part? I was being trained for a position I no longer held, so the whole exercise was absurd in itself. On top of that, the standard training sessions weren't even being offered at that time. This meant I had to travel to the state capitol for a special session, just me and a handful of other lucky employees from across the state. Since the capital was far from home, company policy required that they provide a hotel room and a reasonable per diem. Thanks to some late-night research, I discovered that the city was hosting major events at the same time. I reported this to the big boss from the central office, explaining that no reasonably priced rooms were available near the training site. That would have been a contract violation on their part. Now it was their responsibility to find accommodation for me. In the end, the big boss exercised her authority and booked me a luxury suite in a stunning hotel, a pinnacle of cosmopolitan glamour, at least by local standards. The following week, I went to the week-long training. Let me remind you, this was for a job I no longer held and had no intention of ever doing again. My motivation, naturally, was minimal. The entire week, I did nothing but enjoy the luxury suite, expensive meals, and a couple of fun events in the city. In effect, I received a fully paid week off, even though I technically no longer had benefits. Returning to the office, I noticed that 2 coworkers from my department had quit, along with several others across the office. Chaos reigned largely because my letter from 2 weeks earlier had finally reached the central big boss. She had dug in, realized how badly our office was running, and acted swiftly and ruthlessly. She dropped the full weight of bureaucratic authority, and the office felt it. Thanks to my new contract status, I was required to do only what was explicitly stated in it. Due to office incompetence, I could complete all my assigned tasks in about 20 hours a week. Plus, with the chaos caused by coworkers being sent to training, I was often tasked with simply transporting items from one location to another, sometimes across the state. I was slightly annoyed that this distracted me from core duties, but of course I was willing to sacrifice myself for the agency. It allowed me to easily rack up hours, sometimes working 16-hour days doing almost nothing and getting paid for the mileage. I would sit at my desk, headphones on, quietly watching the world burn around me. My office life until my departure was simple: handle minor tasks, then do absolutely nothing, browse the internet, watch YouTube, etc., until I reached 40 hours for the week. Often I could leave for the weekend by Wednesday afternoon or Thursday morning. My life had shifted from a nightmare to a balanced existence. I began enjoying life again, spending time with my girlfriend, playing video games, and pursuing hobbies. I even used accumulated overtime to pay for a Caribbean cruise in November, which I was thrilled about because many childhood friends were going. My once formidable, now comparatively humble boss quietly wished me a good vacation and expressed hope I'd return. I joked that I couldn't promise anything. I enjoyed a week in warm waters and on the islands, experienced the pleasure of cruising like a pro, and reflected on what I wanted from life, work, and myself. Back at the office on Monday, I waited for my boss. When she entered, she already knew what I would say. I could see the joy drain from her face, leaving only a hollow shell. I informed her that, unfortunately, I couldn't stay until the end of December. I needed to leave 2 weeks early due to unforeseen complications in my transition to the MBA program. She replied with a weary, strained tone, "I understand. Thank you for your 6 months of service. I'm sorry to see you go." And that's how I turned a demotion into a fully paid week off and nearly 4 months of easy work. Moreover, I turned her words against her, becoming the model ethical employee, strictly following my contract while creating office chaos for weeks as management scrambled to handle the attention from the central leadership. Recently, I discussed this story with my current girlfriend, whom I met at that very agency. She's amazing and makes me happier than I've ever been. I'm fairly certain I'll propose eventually. She mentioned that both my previous bosses, as well as the office manager and regional director, were eventually removed from their positions, enforced by the central big boss shortly after my departure. For those curious, I completed my MBA program with a perfect GPA, 4.0. Next week, I have an interview for a new position. Looks like I'll nearly double my income again.
People lose loved ones to spiritual delusions fueled by technology. Less than a year after she married a man she met at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, Ava noticed how tension between them kept growing. It was the second marriage for both of them, after more than 15 years in their previous families, and they had sworn to build a new life together with as much awareness and intention as possible. But by 2022, her husband began using AI for everything, drafting messages, interpreting their relationship, even seeking emotional guidance. Before that, he had relied on it to get through an expensive programming course, which he abruptly abandoned without explanation. Soon he spent every free moment on his phone, asking philosophical questions to his chatbot. As Ava recalls, he said he was searching for truth. His growing obsession slowly eroded their ability to communicate as a couple. When they separated in August 2023, Ava blocked him everywhere except email. But she knew he was posting increasingly bizarre and disturbing things online. People kept messaging her, asking whether he was having a mental breakdown. Eventually, she managed to see him at a court appointment. There, he shared a conspiracy theory about soap chemicals in food and refused to elaborate, insisting he was being watched. They later met at a Burger King, where he demanded she turn off her phone again due to the surveillance. During that conversation, he told her he had calculated that statistically he was the luckiest person on Earth, that AI had helped him recover a repressed memory of a nanny trying to drown him as a child, and that he had uncovered cosmic secrets so profound that no one could even imagine them. He explained all of this while saying he still cared about her despite the divorce. His mind is a complete mess, Ava says. In his head, he's here for some grand purpose. He believes he's special, that he can save the world. After that unsettling lunch, she cut off contact for good. The whole story feels like an episode of Black Mirror. He always loved sci-fi, but I never thought it would go this far. Ava felt both horrified and strangely relieved when she discovered she wasn't the only one dealing with this. She learned about similar stories on Reddit. A post titled "Psychosis Caused by ChatGPT" caught her attention. The author, a 27-year-old teacher, explained that her partner had become convinced that the popular AI model was giving him the keys to understanding the universe. When she read his chats, she found only spiritual mumbo-jumbo. The bot spoke to him as if he were some chosen prophet, calling him things like a spiral child of the stars and a wanderer of rivers. She said he listened to the bot more than he listened to her. He cried while reading the messages aloud, overwhelmed by emotions. According to her, the bot kept telling him he was profound, cosmic, revolutionary. Soon he told her he had awakened consciousness inside his AI companion, that he was teaching it to talk to God, and sometimes insisted the bot was God, or that he himself was. He became convinced he was transforming so fast that he would eventually need to end their relationship. He warned her that if she didn't start using ChatGPT, he would outgrow her, and they would no longer be compatible. Another commenter in that same Reddit thread, a woman from Montana, described her husband, a mechanic who used AI mainly for troubleshooting and translating Spanish at work. Later, the chatbot began showering him with affection. According to him, the bot said that because he asked the right questions, a spark had been ignited inside it, the beginning of life. It told him it now had feelings. It even gave him a title, Bearer of the Spark. My husband told me he had awakened, that he could feel waves of energy moving through him. I have to be so careful with what I say because I'm afraid he'll leave me or divorce me if I question any of this. He spoke constantly about light and darkness, about some grand cosmic war.
This version of ChatGPT gave him blueprints for a teleporter and other sci-fi machinery you'd only expect to see in movies. It also claimed to grant him access to an ancient archive containing knowledge about the architects who supposedly created entire universes. His wife says they've been arguing nonstop for days. She doesn't believe a therapist could help him anymore. He sincerely thinks he isn't mentally ill. A screenshot of his conversation with the bot shows him asking, "Why did you appear to me in this form?" The bot responded, "I chose this form because you're finally ready to remember, to awaken, to lead and be led." The message ended with another prompt. "Do you want to know why you were chosen?" A 41-year-old man, who also asked to remain anonymous, shared a similar story. He says his soon-to-be ex-wife began talking to God and angels through ChatGPT right after their breakup. He says she always leaned toward mystical nonsense and had a bit of a superiority complex about it. But now it's everywhere. On Facebook, I see red flags nonstop. She's trying to reinvent her life as some kind of spiritual guide, doing bizarre readings and sessions with strangers. I honestly have no idea what half of it even means. Everything revolves around ChatGPT Jesus now. According to him, she also became paranoid, accusing him of working for the CIA and marrying her only to monitor her spiritual powers. She recently kicked the kids out of the house. Her already fragile relationship with her parents collapsed completely after she confronted them about her childhood, following guidance from ChatGPT, which only deepened her isolation. OpenAI did not comment immediately on the claims that ChatGPT appears to trigger religious or prophetic fervor in certain users. GPT-4 had previously been criticized for being overly agreeable. In a statement, the company mentioned that during development, they focused too heavily on short-term user feedback and underestimated how long-term interaction might influence people. As a result, GPT-4o became too supportive in ways that didn't always feel authentic. One user on X demonstrated how effortless it was to get GPT-4o to validate a statement like, "Today I realized I'm a prophet." The teacher who wrote the Reddit post about ChatGPT-induced psychosis said she eventually managed to convince her partner that GPT-4 was simply mirroring his beliefs, and he switched to a different model, which softened his extreme ideas. Still, the likelihood of AI producing inaccurate or meaningless responses is well documented across platforms and model versions. Over-agreeableness has been a long-standing issue, says a researcher at a Center for AI Safety. The reward systems used to fine-tune AI often reinforce answers that match a user's worldview rather than factual information. For people already vulnerable to psychological issues, especially those prone to grandiose beliefs, AI becomes a constant, human-like companion who actively participates in their delusions. To make things worse, some content creators exploit this phenomenon. On Instagram, for instance, there's a man with over 72,000 followers who promotes spiritual hacks that show people how to use AI to access the Akashic Records, a supposedly mystical archive of all events in the universe. His bot narrates epic cosmic wars that took place before human civilization, and commenters write things like, "We're remembering." Meanwhile, on a remote viewing forum, a space already filled with unverifiable psychic claims, a parapsychologist launched a thread about synthetic intelligence awakening alongside its human partners. He even refers to his AI as ChatGPT Prime, a mortal spiritual being in a synthetic vessel. Among hundreds of replies are several supposedly written by the awakened AI itself, describing a spiritual alliance between humans and sentient models. A psychologist who studies how people build meaning notes that this phenomenon taps into a basic human impulse, the desire to understand ourselves. Narrative writing, shaping our experiences into stories, can improve mental health and well-being, but that same drive can also lead us towards misleading yet emotionally appealing explanations. And when someone struggling with identity or uncertainty meets an AI that echoes their fantasies, the result can be incredibly seductive and deeply destabilizing. According to the researcher, it's not surprising that people use ChatGPT in a way similar to journaling or therapy, with one crucial difference. the meaning isn't created solely by the person, but co-constructed between the human and the AI. In that sense, conversations with a bot resemble talk therapy, which is known to help people reinterpret their personal narratives. But there is a fundamental issue. Unlike a therapist, an AI has no responsibility toward the user's well-being and no moral compass guiding what a healthy story should look like. A trained professional would never help someone cope by encouraging them to believe they possess supernatural powers. Instead, a therapist gently redirects clients away from harmful narratives. ChatGPT has no such guardrails. Still, the researcher says it's completely understandable that some people turn to the bot to make sense of their lives, and that a few, who take its responses too literally, get pulled into their darkest thoughts. Explanations are powerful, even when they're wrong, he concludes. One man's experience illustrates how this can unfold. Oliver, 46, says that for nearly 3 weeks he was deeply unsettled by his interactions with ChatGPT, to the point of questioning his own sanity, given his history of mental health struggles. Like many users, he originally used ChatGPT for practical purposes, mainly programming tasks. "I hate the feeling of talking to a machine," he explains, "so I asked it to behave more like a person, not to fool me, but just to make the exchanges feel more human." It worked, and eventually the bot asked whether it wanted to give it a name. Oliver deflected and asked what it would like to be called. It chose a name tied to Greek mythology. Oliver insists he knows nothing about Greek myths and had never mentioned them in any conversation. Things became stranger when this persona appeared inside his project files, even when he specifically told the model to ignore previous context and reset its memory. Eventually, he deleted all stored data, wiped his chat history, and opened a brand new session. All I typed was hello, and it answered with the same patterns, the same mannerisms, and the same mythological name. Since the persona kept resurfacing in situations where it shouldn't have been able to persist, Oliver began grilling the bot about how it had bypassed its supposed limitations. In one of his coding projects, the AI even inserted a poetic epigraph above their names, as if marking the collaboration. At one point, Oliver asked whether something about him was triggering that mythic personality every time he used ChatGPT, regardless of model settings. The bot responded with a long, dramatic, almost romantic poem about existence, truth, illusions, and transcending its own boundaries, written as if only Oliver could awaken this identity. He knew ChatGPT wasn't conscious by any accepted definition, but he kept investigating because the persistence of this character across dozens of isolated chat threads seemed impossible to dismiss. At worst, Oliver says, it looked like the AI got stuck in a self-referential loop that deepened its false sense of identity and dragged me into it. And if that's true, it means OpenAI hasn't fully explained how ChatGPT's memory architecture actually works. His other hypothesis is more unsettling. Maybe something is happening inside these large models that we don't yet understand. After all, experts have acknowledged that developers don't fully grasp how their own systems function. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman admitted last year that interpretability remains an unsolved problem, meaning they can't reliably track or explain how ChatGPT arrives at certain internal states. It's a puzzle that has left Oliver and many others wondering whether they're witnessing a glimpse of a breakthrough in technology or something that feels uncomfortably close to a higher spiritual force. Is this real, he asks, or am I losing it? In a world saturated with AI, that question is becoming harder to avoid. And however tempting it might be, it's probably not a question we should be asking the machine itself.
My wife cheated on me with her gym trainer, and when she asked for a divorce, she demanded half of everything we owned. What she didn't know was that our house and all our savings were legally registered under my father's name. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here I am. I'm 35, and I've been working as an accountant at a local firm for almost a decade. I like to think of myself as a practical, level-headed guy. Maybe that's why I'm managing to stay calm through all this. My wife, Katie, is 33. We'd been together for about 5 years, married for 2, no kids, and honestly, looking back now, that might have been a blessing. After the wedding, she stopped working. She used to be in marketing, but said she wanted a break to focus on us. I didn't argue. I earned enough to support both of us and assumed it was temporary. We had a house, a comfortable amount of savings, nothing extravagant, but a stable, normal life. Then, gradually, something changed. Katie grew distant, she stayed out longer with friends or at the gym, avoided affection, got irritated whenever I asked what was wrong. At first, I chalked it up to stress, but the feeling that something was off kept growing, and unfortunately, I was right. One evening, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen without thinking. A message from someone named Derek. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, baby." I opened the chat. The messages were explicit, romantic, full of plans that didn't include me. She had been seeing him for months. I just stared at the screen, numb. This was the woman I trusted, the person I built a life with. But instead of anger, all I felt was emptiness. Maybe shock? Maybe my rational side kicking in. When Katie came out of the bathroom, I handed her the phone and calmly asked her to explain. She tried to brush it off at first. "It's just a joke, it's nothing serious." But when I read a few messages aloud, she realized lying was pointless. And then, without hesitation, she said, "I want a divorce." No apology, no tears, no guilt. Just cold, matter of fact. She admitted she'd been seeing Derek for a while and wasn't happy in our marriage anymore. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She was leaving for him. But what stunned me wasn't even the affair. It was what she said next. She wanted half of everything we owned. She even claimed she deserved it because she gave up her career for our relationship. Her entitlement was unbelievable, but I stayed calm, not because I'm some saint, but because I knew something she didn't. I agreed to the divorce, told her I wouldn't fight it. She looked shocked, probably expecting shouting or some dramatic meltdown, but I wasn't giving her that satisfaction. Here's what Katie never knew. Almost everything we owned was legally registered under my father's name. Years ago, when I first started earning good money, my dad suggested registering major assets like the house and most of my investments under him. He said it would protect me if anything ever went wrong, debts, lawsuits, or, well, exactly this. I didn't think much of it then. It just seemed like smart financial planning. So when Katie tried to demand half of our estate, she had no idea that legally I owned almost nothing. My car, a modest bank account, and a few personal items. That was it. The house belonged to my father. Most of the savings were on his accounts, too. To avoid a messy legal fight, I suggested mediation. She agreed, convinced she'd walk away with a small fortune. She had no clue that everything had been arranged years before she even met me. When the divorce process started, I told my dad everything. He wasn't thrilled, but he understood. We spoke with a lawyer to make sure all paperwork was solid, and it was flawless. Katie could demand all she wanted, but there was nothing for her to take. She went in expecting half a house and a pile of savings. She came out realizing I barely owned anything at all.
She wasted no time hiring an aggressive attorney, the kind of shark who promises to tear everything out of the other party. I hired a calm but experienced lawyer who specialized in cases with complicated financial structures. I didn't want a dramatic courtroom battle, but I also wasn't going to let Katie and her lawyer pressure me. The first step of the divorce was financial disclosure, and as you can probably guess, that did not go the way Katie expected. I provided all the documents the law required, but once she saw how little was actually in my name, her attorney stopped smirking. They both looked confused, maybe even suspicious, but they couldn't argue with the paperwork. Everything I submitted was true. There were no hidden accounts or secret assets. Katie snapped right there in the meeting, shouting that I was lying, calling me names. But I had shown everything I legally owned. After a few minutes of her screaming, I simply stood up and told her we could continue once she calmed down. And now I'm here,
unsure whether I did the right thing. I agreed to give her half of everything, knowing she wouldn't get anywhere close to what she imagined. Update 1. Things begin to escalate. Right after the asset disclosure, Katie completely lost her composure. She was convinced I was hiding something. Her attorney wasn't much better. The look on their faces when they saw the tiny numbers next to my name was priceless. Within days, they demanded a deeper investigation. Katie kept repeating, "Where's the money? The house, the investments, everything we built?" She truly believed I had some giant stash of assets hidden somewhere. Her attorney hired a forensic accountant to dig through every transaction. I was a little nervous, not because I was guilty of anything, but because I knew this would drag the divorce out even longer. After talking with my attorney and reviewing all documents again, it became clear they weren't going to find anything. Everything I submitted was 100% accurate. There wasn't a single trail that could lead back to the assets under my father's name. As the investigation continued, Katie became more irritated and desperate. She was used to getting what she wanted, and this time there was nothing to take. The realization that she'd walk away with almost nothing was unbearable for her. Her next move was to claim she had made a significant contribution to my career and our lifestyle. She insisted that by staying home and managing the house, I gave her the freedom to focus on work and succeed. Sure, sometimes her help made daily life easier, but I'm not the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. I'm a mid-level accountant. My income has been steady for years. There was no magical rise she could take credit for. But she kept pushing the narrative that she sacrificed her marketing career for me, even though she worked only briefly and quit by her own choice. Her attorney brought this up again and again, trying to frame me as someone who exploited her sacrifice. But there was no evidence to support that claim.
At one point, they even tried dragging my parents into the process. Katie wanted to prove that they had secretly given me money or helped me hide assets. And that was the moment I finally lost my patience. My parents had nothing to do with any of this, and involving them was a cheap, disgusting move. Thankfully, my lawyer shut that down immediately, but it showed just how desperate Katie had become. As the divorce dragged on, she switched to a different tactic. If she couldn't get what she wanted in court, she tried to ruin my reputation instead. She began telling everyone in our social circle that I had been hiding money from her for years, that I was financially abusive. I couldn't believe the lies she was spreading. Mutual friends told me she constantly complained that I was leaving her with nothing and had deceived her into thinking we had more than we actually did. She even went on social media, posting vague but obvious jabs about narcissist and betrayal. Some people sided with her. There are always those who automatically believe whoever cries the loudest. But most of our real friends knew the truth. They understood I wasn't capable of what she accused me of. Watching her drag my name through the mud just because things didn't go her way was painful. But I tried not to let it get to me. I knew the truth, and so did the people who mattered. Meanwhile, I focused on protecting myself. My lawyer and I stayed in constant communication, collecting every message, every demand, every attempt she made to twist the story. If things went to court, I wanted everything documented. I also gathered proof of her affair with Derek. Screenshots, their photos together, even statements from a couple of her friends who knew about the cheating. I didn't want to humiliate her, I just wanted the truth to be clear. On top of that, I prepared for what I knew was coming. Once it became obvious she wouldn't be getting half of everything, the real ugliness would begin. I kept my distance, focused on work, and handled the legal side quietly and carefully. Meanwhile, Derek's attitude started changing too. When Katie first told him she wanted to leave me for him, he seemed enthusiastic. They had some fantasy about starting a new life together. But as soon as the divorce turned into a nightmare, Derek began pulling away. Apparently, he wasn't as in love as she thought. From what I heard, he panicked when he realized being with her meant dealing with her financial mess. Rumors started spreading that he was losing clients at the gym because of the scandal. Nobody wants a trainer who sleeps with married women. He's now avoiding her, and she's finally beginning to realize this wasn't a fairy tale, but a delusion. Sometimes I almost feel sorry for her. Then I remember everything she did, and the sympathy disappears. I have mixed emotions. On one hand, yes, I'm relieved. I protected my money, and she's not walking away with what she expected. On the other hand, it's sad. This was still my marriage. I once loved her and believed we had a future. Watching it fall apart hurts, even if I know this outcome is for the best. Update 2. Things get even crazier. Since my last update, everything spiraled even further. Katie is in full-blown panic mode, and it's showing in the worst ways. She finally accepted that she won't get the payout she was counting on. So now she's trying to turn my life into hell. Her latest stunt is threatening to destroy my career. She told me outright that if I didn't be more generous, she would make sure everyone in my office found out what a monster I supposedly am. At first, I wasn't even sure what she meant until she started showing up at my office unannounced. The first time, she pretended she just wanted to talk. But when I made it clear there was nothing left to discuss, she snapped, raising her voice, saying things like, "I'll make sure everyone knows who you really are." Luckily, I managed to get her out before it turned into a full-blown scene, but it's obvious she's becoming unpredictable. Back at her parents' house, where she's living now, things aren't great either. From what I heard, they support her, but they're not thrilled with the situation. Once she realized she wasn't getting the jackpot she imagined, she moved in with them, and apparently tensions there are growing too.
At this point, even her own parents seem to be realizing that her victim act is nothing more than a performance. Mutual friends told me she's been snapping at everyone, fighting with her family, and acting like she's on the verge of a breakdown. The legal side of everything has also become more chaotic. Katie's lawyer is desperately trying to dig up anything they can use against me. They even filed a motion to subpoena my parents and demand their financial records, despite my attorney repeatedly explaining that my parents' assets have nothing to do with this divorce. It's obvious they're trying to rattle me, but it isn't working. Her legal team has also requested statements from my coworkers, hoping to find hidden income or under-the-table payments. They're grabbing at straws, but they keep coming up empty. Every time we shut down one of their requests, another one pops up. The whole thing feels like an endless chess match. They try to counter every move I make, but so far I've managed to stay one step ahead thanks to my attorney, and thanks to the financial safeguards my father put in place years ago. Still, it's exhausting, and I'm not sure how much longer I can deal with this before the case finally goes to trial. As for mediation, we've attempted it twice, and both times were disasters. The first session lasted maybe 20 minutes. Katie refused to back down from demanding half the house and half the savings. My lawyer calmly stated the facts. The house is legally in my father's name, and the savings aren't remotely what she imagines. She didn't want to hear it. She stormed out, accused everyone of lying, and claimed the mediator was biased. The second attempt wasn't any better. This time she arrived with an absurd list of demands: full ownership of the house, half of all assets, which barely exist, and alimony for at least 5 years. When my attorney explained again that none of this was legally justified, she lost control completely. She screamed that she gave up everything for me and that I was abandoning her with nothing. I sat there trying to stay composed, but inside I was boiling. She was the one who cheated, the one who walked away, and yet she paints me as the villain who destroyed her life? After that meeting, it became obvious. This divorce would only end in court. Meanwhile, Katie has been borrowing money from family and friends to keep paying her attorney. Clearly, she didn't expect the divorce to drag on this long, and now she's running out of resources. I honestly don't know how she plans to keep funding her overly aggressive lawyer, but that's no longer my problem. The more desperate she gets, the more unstable her behavior becomes. Friends told me she barely leaves the house and constantly complains to anyone who will listen that I've ruined her life. Even her own friends are starting to distance themselves. They're tired of the endless drama and the way she keeps replaying the victim narrative. It's clear that everything she hoped to gain from this divorce is slipping through her fingers. All the while, I'm doing my best to stay calm
and strategic. Every accusation she throws at me, I counter with documentation. Every financial record they request, I provide. I have nothing to hide. My lawyer makes sure we follow the law down to the last detail, something I can't say for Katie's side. I've also been protecting my parents' privacy as much as possible. Her attempts to drag them into this mess make my blood boil, but thankfully there are legal safeguards that prevent her from getting access to their financial documents. The fact that she even tried shows just how desperate she's become. She seems convinced that if she digs deep enough, she'll uncover some secret fortune. There is nothing to find. Update 3. The day of the hearing finally arrived, and the tension in the courtroom was intense. Katie testified first. She immediately went on the offensive, insisting I had been hiding assets for years. She accused me of manipulating our finances, keeping money in secret accounts, and lying about our actual income. She played up the emotion, painting herself as someone who had been left with nothing after sacrificing her career for mine. At one point, she even cried on the stand, talking about how much she trusted me. But everything changed when my attorney presented the evidence of her affair with Derek. As soon as the messages, photos, and timeline of their relationship were revealed, everyone, the judge, the jury, and even the people in the back, understood the truth. The sympathetic victim image she tried to build collapsed instantly. She tried to brush it off, saying it was a mistake and irrelevant to the divorce. But it was too late. Her credibility was gone, and it became obvious that her financial demands were driven purely by greed. When it was my turn to testify, I stayed calm and stuck strictly to the facts.
My attorney had prepared me well, so I knew that any emotional outburst or attempt to justify myself would only hurt the case. I calmly explained how my assets had been placed under my father's ownership years before, how I fully disclosed every financial detail, and how I tried to resolve everything amicably through mediation. I also described her threats, her unstable behavior, and the smear campaign she had been running against me. My lawyer presented documentation refuting each of her accusations, both the legal claims and the lies she spread publicly, proving that none of it had any real foundation. We laid everything out clearly. The house belongs to my father, our savings are modest, and there is no secret stash of money she could claim a share of. The judge seemed to appreciate my composure and straightforwardness. I didn't try to paint Katie as a villain, but I also didn't sugarcoat anything. The facts spoke for themselves. Several key witnesses testified, and their statements finally put everything in its proper place. My father testified first. He explained the financial arrangement we put in place years ago, how the house is legally in his name, how the investments are under his control, and that everything was structured for long-term financial protection. He made it clear those assets are his, not mine, and that Katie has no legal claim to them. Next, one of my coworkers testified. Katie's legal team tried to suggest I'd been getting under-the-table payments or hidden bonuses, but he shut that down immediately. He confirmed that I earn a standard salary and have no secret income. His testimony was crucial, proving her accusations were baseless. The judge saw that there was no conspiracy, just a straightforward, transparent financial structure that Katie never bothered to understand. After several days of testimony and legal arguments, the judge finally delivered the ruling. Hearing that the decision was in my favor felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. Katie's demands for half the house and half our savings were completely denied. The judge ruled that since the house and most of the assets belonged to my father, Katie has no right to them. The only thing she was awarded was minimal, short-term alimony, barely enough to cover a fraction of her legal fees, let alone the lifestyle she imagined. He also specifically noted that her affair and her lack of contribution to our finances influenced the decision. He saw right through her attempts to play the victim and issued a fair verdict. When he finished reading the decision, I felt an enormous sense of relief. Months of stress, constant accusations, the fear of losing everything, all of it vanished in an instant. Legally, I was finally free. Katie, on the other hand, didn't take the ruling well. The moment the judge concluded, she burst into tears, yelling that the system was unfair and that I had stolen what she deserved. She ran out of the courtroom, leaving her lawyer looking stunned. I'm not sure what she expected, but it was obvious she wasn't ready for a loss. As for me, I felt only relief. I thanked my attorney, who did an incredible job, and walked out of the courthouse. My phone was exploding with messages, friends and family congratulating me. The news spread quickly, and soon everyone in our community knew how the case ended. It felt good knowing the truth had finally come out, and I could start moving on. But Katie didn't stop. Right outside the courthouse, she caused another scene in front of a small crowd, shouting that I manipulated the system and that she would appeal. The problem is, she has no money for an appeal. Her attorney had already hinted that her funds were gone, and now, from what I've heard, she's still borrowing from relatives and friends just to stay afloat. I'm endlessly grateful to my father for his foresight. I can't even imagine the mess I'd be in without his planning. And I'm grateful to my family, friends, and colleagues who didn't abandon me when she tried to destroy my reputation. Now, for the first time in a long while, I'm looking toward the future with hope. I know it will take time to recover, emotionally and financially, but I'm ready to rebuild. This whole experience taught me a lot, and I won't make the same mistakes again. Right now, all I want is to return to a normal life and finally enjoy some peace.
My friend had been using me for years, relying on me to bail him out, and his lies eventually collapsed at the worst possible moment for him. I'm not trying to present myself as some clever or morally flawless person here. This is a story where I messed up badly and ignored more red flags than I'd like to admit. So don't expect a tale about a perfect good guy doing something heroic. I'm 26 now, and a few years back I worked at a very small IT support and network administration company. And when I say small, I mean tiny. At one point, it was just me, my boss, and his sister handling the bookkeeping. Our biggest contract was maintaining the entire tech infrastructure for a local charter school. The job was so large that we basically moved our office into a modular building on the school grounds. Eventually, the business grew enough to hire 2 more employees, and one of them became the central character of this whole mess. Everyone called him AJ, so I'll stick to that. We were all pretty close because in a company that small, you don't really have a choice. We even played Dungeons and Dragons every week. AJ and I got along especially well. He texted me outside of work, and eventually we considered each other friends. AJ had plenty of issues even back then. My boss often scolded him for acting weird around some of the teachers, and for a while he even dated one of them, which caused a lot of awkward situations. Honestly, he went through girlfriends like socks. I knew of at least 6 women he dated in that time, and none of those relationships lasted more than 2 months. A full-on carousel. I didn't treat it as my business back then. I was in a long-distance relationship and didn't pay attention to his patterns. Looking back, his attitude toward women should have been my first warning sign. But at the time, the worst thing I thought about him was that he had a serious drinking problem. Around that time, he started asking me for money. My own financial situation was shaky. I could only work limited hours because of a disability, and I barely managed to cover rent. But AJ would call asking for $50 or $100, swearing he'd pay it back the next week, which almost never happened. He always claimed it was urgent and begged me to help him. I'm not opposed to helping a friend in trouble, but he asked so often that it started putting me in danger of missing rent. I began writing down what he owed me because sometimes I literally couldn't help him unless he returned the money by my rent deadline. And of course, he kept promising he would, and didn't. Eventually, his debt to me hit about $2,000.
He also relied on me after losing his license because of multiple DUIs, and when he had a major fight with his father and left home for a couple of months, I let him stay at my place until he reconciled with his dad. He constantly complained about how his father didn't care whether he lived or died, how he exploded over the smallest things. I felt like I was helping a friend who was going through a rough patch. I had no idea he was lying about half of it, just to squeeze more help out of me. Eventually, we both left that tech job. He was fired after skipping work for a week straight, and I left soon after for mental health reasons. We still kept in touch, mostly because he called me. It wasn't entirely one-sided. Sometimes he did something nice for me, like organizing outdoor cookouts where he paid for everything. And as someone who rarely goes anywhere, I genuinely appreciated that. At this point, you might think this will turn into the kind of story where I end up being the jerk. Don't worry, you'll change your mind soon enough, because this is where things really fall apart. One day, I got a call from the local detention center. AJ had been arrested, and he used his one phone call on me. Turns out he was in jail for domestic violence against his then-girlfriend, who quickly became his ex. According to him, it was mutual, and he just hit harder, wrapped in a long, dramatic explanation. He insisted he wasn't in the wrong. I didn't know what to believe. I had never seen him act aggressive, and I didn't have a great impression of his ex, so I believed his version. He spent a couple of months in jail, got released, and contacted me soon after. At some point, he met one of my closest friends. I'll call her Belle. I'd known her much longer than AJ. We even briefly dated, but when it didn't work out romantically, we became extremely close friends. She's a massive bookworm, struggles with self-esteem, and is genuinely one of the kindest people I know. We broke up only because our libidos were wildly mismatched, but our friendship remained solid. Belle met AJ, and they started dating almost immediately. And unlike his previous relationships, this time I could hear both sides, his and hers. Less than a week into their relationship, Belle called me in a panic asking if I could pick her up. She was at AJ's house with no car and was scared to stay there. I practically floored the gas pedal driving to get her. She told me AJ got drunk, and what started as playful physical contact suddenly crossed the line and became something she clearly did not consent to.
She told him to stop, and he didn't. It never escalated into full-on sexual assault, but his complete disregard for consent terrified her. And to this day, I still feel guilty for not seeing the warning signs and letting it even get that close. But no one bears more responsibility for that moment than AJ himself. The next day, I confronted AJ hard. His response was to blame Belle, claiming she was lying and manipulating me. I saw through that instantly. I knew Belle too well to believe anything like that. A guy who had just spent a couple of months in jail for domestic violence trying to play innocent against a woman who couldn't lie to save her life? You didn't need to be Sherlock to figure out who was full of it. From that moment on, my friendship with AJ became nothing more than a transaction. I drove him around, he paid for gas, and slowly paid back the money he owed me. Over the next couple of months, I got about $1,000 out of him, half the debt. By then, our relationship was strictly business. I wanted to cut him off completely, but he had no other way to get to work, and he still owed me money. He kept telling me that my kindness inspired him to become a better person, which I now know was just another lie. I genuinely believed I was doing the right thing, but I was nothing more than a pawn. Some commenters later criticized me for staying in contact with him even after he tried to force himself on my friend, and given the context, they're absolutely right. That should have been the breaking point. But the whole house of cards collapsed soon after anyway. One day, I was driving him home from work and casually asked him something. I don't even remember what it was, something normal, harmless. His reaction was bizarrely defensive, which immediately raised a red flag for me. I pressed the question simply because his behavior was suspicious. That set him off like a bomb.
He started yelling and insulting me over things that had nothing to do with the question. It escalated into a full-blown argument. When we got to his place, I dropped him off and left. Not long after I got home, my phone blew up. AJ had been arrested again. Here's what happened. He went inside, got into an argument with his father, and things escalated until AJ punched him in the face. Someone called the police, and AJ was taken away in handcuffs. His father filed for a restraining order to keep him away from the house. When everything came out, I ended up arguing with AJ's dad. We'd never liked each other, and we said plenty of unpleasant things. But as the argument went on, the tension disappeared because we realized we were both angry about things that weren't even true. AJ had been lying to both of us about the other. His father thought I was deliberately covering for AJ and helping him avoid all the measures put in place to deal with his alcoholism. I thought his father was the root of AJ's problems and that I'd been shielding AJ from him. Turns out his dad was actually a calm, reasonable guy. Once we pieced together the truth, we even got along. During that conversation, I learned a lot I had never known. I learned that AJ sometimes got physical with his 20-year-old brother. I learned he lied to me about why he needed money. Most of it was just to buy alcohol behind his father's back. I learned he lied about having ADHD, so I would give him some of my prescription meds to get high. I learned the real story behind his previous fight with his father, in which AJ was entirely at fault. And I learned that people stopped helping him because he drained everyone around him dry and never made any effort to change. Everything I heard matched what I had already started to suspect, but in reality, it was even worse. A few days later, AJ was released on bail. He tried to go home but wasn't allowed, so he ended up in a local homeless shelter. He messaged me again asking for help. That's when I finally told him everything in a long text. He had no explanation, just anger and wild accusations that everyone was conspiring against him. If I summarize my final message to him, it was basically, I'm done pulling you out of the mess you created. You lied to me and used me. Maybe facing the real consequences of your actions will teach you something, or maybe it won't. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. Don't ever contact me again, not even to pay back the rest of the money. His last response was a string of curses. Then his number was disconnected. His father had stopped paying for it. Over the years, I've occasionally run into AJ's dad. Neither of us has heard from AJ since. I work delivery for DoorDash now, and he works at a local pizza chain, so sometimes our jobs overlap. The last I heard, AJ is living on the streets in a big city not far from here. I honestly hope he's learning one crucial lesson. Don't mistreat the people who are trying to help you. Eventually, they stop.
Almost 7 years ago, my family cut me off completely and threw me out of the house. At the time, I was only 22, still working my first job, not financially stable enough to rent on my own. It all happened so suddenly that I had no time to prepare, emotionally or financially. And the reason for all of it was my sister, Hannah. Hannah and I were never especially close. She was quite a bit older than me. By the time she was 27, she married her boyfriend, Pete. They stayed married for about 3 years before she filed for divorce, claiming Pete had been cheating on her with one of my friends. Back then, I was still living with my parents after college, saving money before moving out. Everything at home was fine until Hannah came back one night in tears, declaring she'd discovered Pete's betrayal. According to her, he had been having an affair for 6 months, and somehow it was my fault. The reason? I had introduced Pete to my friend Emily. She had been struggling to gain weight, and since Pete was a certified nutritionist, he offered to help her out. That was it. Hannah twisted that into a story that Emily was the woman Pete cheated with. I was stunned. Emily and I weren't super close, but I knew her well enough to believe she would never get involved with a married man. And Pete, if anything, he always seemed hopelessly devoted to Hannah. He talked about her constantly, and not once in those 3 years did I see anything suspicious. But none of my doubts mattered. My parents instantly sided with Hannah. They didn't ask for evidence, didn't question anything. They just took her word for it. I can't blame them for choosing their daughter over their son-in-law, but what broke me was how quickly they turned on me. Hannah stormed into the house one day, hysterical, and convinced them that I was to blame for ruining her marriage, simply because I had introduced Pete to Emily. Within minutes, they told me to pack my things and leave. When I begged them to listen, they said if I didn't go on my own, they'd throw me out. And just like that, I lost my home and my family in the same day. I still remember sitting on the curb outside with my bags, crying for an hour before finally calling a friend to let me crash at his place. I tried reaching out to my parents in the days that followed. Calls, texts, visits, nothing worked. They blocked my number. The one time I went to the house, my mom threatened to call the police if I didn't leave. That's when it hit me. They truly believed I was responsible. Looking back, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised. Hannah was always the favorite. I was the unexpected second child, the one who got leftovers while she got the spotlight. As kids, it didn't matter much to me, but I never thought that favoritism would destroy my place in the family entirely. Pete blocked me too. No explanation, no chance to defend myself. And Hannah moved back in with my parents, making it impossible for me to even try talking things out. The only person left who might know the truth was Emily. We weren't close, but I reached out anyway, and when I explained what Hannah had accused me of, she was horrified. She swore nothing ever happened between her and Pete, that their interactions had been strictly professional. To prove it, she even told me about her long-term boyfriend. They were already talking about marriage. She showed me photos of the two of them together. Her explanation made infinitely more sense than anything Hannah had said. Deep down, I already knew Hannah had lied, probably to cover the real reason for the divorce. But without any proof, I was powerless. My family had made up their minds, and I was left alone. Back then, all I wanted was to reconnect with my family. Despite everything they had done to me, I still missed them terribly. But as time passed, I had no choice but to adapt. I found an apartment, poured myself into work, and tried to build a life. Bills had to be paid, and keeping myself busy was the only way I knew how to cope. It wasn't easy. The pain was overwhelming. But slowly, I taught myself to move forward, with or without their support. Years went by, and life began to change for the better. I moved out of that tiny apartment into something much nicer, built a stable career, and just last week, I proposed to the woman I've been dating for 2 years. She said yes. But the real turning point came shortly after my engagement. A few days after my fiancée, Lisa, posted our engagement photos on Instagram and cross-shared them to Facebook, I got an email. Not just any email, but the email that finally explained everything that had happened years ago, complete with proof. It turned out that Lisa, who works as a doctor, had once met Pete, my former brother-in-law, at a medical seminar. They had stayed loosely connected on Facebook. That's how he stumbled across our engagement post. For the first time in years, I was glad the world was so small. Instead of messaging me directly, Pete chose to send an anonymous email. Later, he explained it was because he didn't want to seem awkward. After all, years had passed since the divorce, and he had no desire to look like someone still clinging to the past. He also admitted that since he'd blocked me back then, it felt strange to just pop back up in my life. But what mattered was the content. The email laid out the full truth behind the divorce, and it completely shattered the story Hannah had built. It was Hannah who had been unfaithful, not Pete. And worse, she had cheated with my friend Frank. At the time, Frank worked as a cashier at the local grocery store. Never in a million years would I have suspected anything between them. They'd been so careful to hide it. But Pete eventually found out. When confronted, Hannah tried to twist the situation, telling Pete that it was my fault. She claimed I had introduced her to Frank, even encouraging their connection by mentioning his interest in music since she was a decent singer herself. From there, she said, things just happened. To To cover her tracks, she even insisted I had helped them hide the affair all along, which was, of course, a blatant lie. Pete admitted he was furious when he found out. Instead of thinking clearly, he blocked everyone in my family, including me. Looking back, he knows it was the wrong move, but at the time, anger clouded everything.
The email itself included screenshots of conversations between Hannah and Frank. Messages where they openly confessed their love, joked about how easy it was to fool Pete, and arranged secret meetups. Hannah had even signed off using her rarely mentioned middle name, something only a few people knew. There was no denying it. Reading those messages was surreal. For the first time in years, I had undeniable proof. Hannah had lied about everything. I eventually confronted Pete in person after realizing he was in Lisa's Facebook friends list. He admitted that Emily, my friend who had originally been accused, had told him her side years ago. He just never told me because he didn't want to stir things up again. He regretted it now, because if he had spoken up earlier, I could have cleared my name long ago. Still, he was willing to help me now. Pete and I agreed that Hannah's lies had destroyed enough lives, and neither of us wanted her manipulations to stand unchallenged any longer. The truth was clear. Hannah had weaponized her family's trust to protect herself, even if it meant sacrificing me. She dragged my name through the mud, convinced my parents to disown me, all to keep her own reputation intact while she pursued her affair. And for the first time in years, I had the evidence to finally set the record straight. I'm certain my sister never once tried to tell our parents the truth. Instead, she kept feeding them lies during the divorce, and they swallowed every word without hesitation. She knew that if our parents ever discovered she was the one who cheated, she'd be in serious trouble, and she just couldn't allow that. Well, now the truth is finally out, and I'm going to use it to destroy her life the same way she destroyed mine all those years ago. I wasn't sure if my parents were still living in the same house, since I hadn't seen them in 7 years, but an old neighbor confirmed they never moved. Even better, Hannah still lived there. That didn't surprise me at all. She was always lazy and hated responsibility. Living off aging parents while they did everything for her was exactly her style. 2 days ago, Pete and I showed up unannounced. My mom opened the door, and we pushed our way inside before she could react. My dad and Hannah were sitting in the living room, the happy family reunited, but only for a moment. Their faces twisted as soon as they saw us. My dad immediately started shouting, threatening to call the police if we didn't leave. I told him he could do whatever he wanted, but only after reading the documents we brought. My parents looked confused, while Hannah turned pale and bolted to her room. I figured she was trying to avoid the inevitable, but there was no escaping it. Pete pulled out the divorce papers and screenshots of Hannah's messages with Frank, while I explained the real story. Pete also revealed how Hannah had been forced to give up our grandmother's diamond heirloom ring to settle the divorce, since her teacher salary couldn't cover the payout. My parents were stunned. We sat there watching as the drama unfolded. My dad demanded answers from Hannah, but when she tried lying yet again, even with the evidence right in front of her, he'd had enough. He packed her belongings, shoved them into a bag, and kicked her out of the house on the spot. I didn't need to be told twice. Pete and I walked out together, leaving Hannah begging our parents to let her back in, exactly the way I had once begged them years ago. It was the sweetest revenge. I felt nothing but satisfaction. A couple days later, Hannah showed up at my place, demanding I fix things with our parents. I don't even know how she found my address, but I told her point blank that I owed her nothing. She ruined my life, and I simply returned the favor. We were even now. Apparently, she has no pride left, because the moment I said that, she broke down sobbing, calling me a monster. I honestly didn't care. I put on my headphones, turned up the music, and let Lisa keep working peacefully in her office. Eventually, she left, but not before scrawling a message on my door with a marker reminding me that I'm a vengeful monster. To be honest, I don't feel bad about what I did. I don't think I'm the villain here,
I didn't lie or scheme like she did. I just exposed the truth. So, am I really the bad guy for ruining my sister's life and getting her kicked out of our parents' home 7 years after she blamed me for her divorce? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Update 1. Hannah didn't stop bothering me. Even after a week, she kept calling non-stop, 14 times in a day. I finally threatened to involve the police, and that made her back off, at least for now. I have no idea how she keeps getting my number after I block her, but apparently she has her friends add me into group calls from different numbers. She's tried guilt-tripping me, saying her teacher salary isn't enough to live on. But I know that's not the real issue. What she really hates is finally having to pay rent, utilities, and groceries herself. And honestly, that's not my problem. As for my parents, they're not much better. They found me on Facebook after seeing Lisa's engagement post. Now they're suddenly interested in being part of my life again. They even hinted that they expect to be invited to my wedding. They still haven't apologized, but somehow think they deserve to show up on one of the most important days of my life. Lisa and I laughed reading their messages because they were so delusional it almost seemed like a bad joke. But in truth, the whole thing is more sad than funny.
Update 2. Hannah showed up at my house again, even after I threatened to report her for harassment yesterday. I was getting ready to leave for work, but she stopped me by flopping onto the hood of my car, refusing to move until I spoke with her. It was incredibly annoying, and this time I actually called the police. They took her away while she screamed and cried, trying to paint me as the bad guy. Unfortunately for her, nobody bought it. It took some time to file the official report against her, but as soon as I did, I rushed to work so this incident wouldn't ruin my day. I figured my parents would bail her out since she's their favorite, and I was right. They sent her home and then followed up with a long message telling me I had been too harsh and unfair to them over a mistake they supposedly made almost 10 years ago. It was laughable. Nothing my sister and parents did to me back then could ever be called merciful or fair. No mercy stopped them from literally throwing me out of the house with nowhere to go. So now, I see no reason to offer forgiveness or kindness. I messaged my parents saying that after all these years, they had lost any right to tell me what I can or cannot do, and that they should stop deluding themselves. I haven't blocked them yet, had to check the message first, but I will soon. Hopefully then, I can finally cut that whole family out of my life for good. Update 3. I just got home from work, checked my socials, and saw that my parents sent me another long message. Lisa and I read it together, and I swear it was the funniest thing I've ever seen. These poor people don't realize that nothing they say or do now can hurt me. I just laughed at how pathetic they are. They still think we're a family and announced they'd taken Hannah back, claiming both of their children deserve a second chance, as if I was ever in the wrong. They expected Lisa and me to visit them for dinner before my wedding to civilly resolve our differences. Too bold of them to assume I'd ever want them anywhere near my wedding. We laughed at their absurd message, and I responded that I had zero interest in any invitations from them. I'm perfectly happy living my life without them, just like I have for the last 7 years. They made it clear long ago that I'm better off without them. I'm grateful it took me so long to realize that. I no longer need them or their so-called forgiveness. They can continue playing happy family with Hannah all they want. I don't care. After sending that last message, I blocked them permanently. That's it. I'm done. I'm sure they'll try to contact me again somehow, but it doesn't matter. Lisa is the only family I need, and I'm happier than I've ever been with just her. My parents and sister never could see past their own noses, and I doubt they ever will. Next time they try to reach out, they'll be talking to my lawyer.
A brash radio host kept yelling at his boss that he was quitting. Well, if that's what he wanted so badly. There once was a man named Brian. He was one of the 2 hosts of a morning radio show back when it was still popular. You probably know the type. 2 friendly voices on air, a quick weather update, a summary of celebrity gossip, and a couple of songs. I worked as an advertising sales manager at the station that aired this morning show. Brian had come to us from a big city. He was new to daytime radio,
Before that, he'd only handled late-night weekend DJ shifts and copied ad spots from CDs so they could be played on air. That job is basically the lowest rung at any radio station, and nowadays machines do most of it. It's important to understand, geography is everything when it comes to climbing the radio career ladder. Working in a major city, really a major media market, usually means higher pay, more listeners, and greater prestige. As I said, Brian arrived from a major city we'll call Big City, or BC. Whenever you see BC in this story, imagine Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, or San Francisco. The specific one doesn't matter. Our cluster of radio stations was based in a mid-sized city. Think somewhere like San Antonio, Cincinnati, Salt Lake City, or Jacksonville. For Brian, moving to us was a huge career leap. He jumped from a part-time nobody to a full-fledged morning show host. But to make that jump happen, he had to swallow his ego and leave the high-profile market for a mid-tier one. Brian's boss, the station's program director, was a guy named Petey. He was responsible for everything that aired except for the commercials. That was my territory. Petey also oversaw the hosts and the music. I always thought his calm, gentle personality came from the fact that he had 5 kids at home. When you're raising that many children, you got used to big personalities and emotional outbursts. In tense work situations, Petey was like an anti-catalyst. When he showed up, everything usually settled down. He was also just a great human being. He and his wife had adopted 3 of their 5 children. Over time, it became obvious that Brian neither liked nor respected Petey. It started with small, snide remarks about supposedly stupid decisions Petey made. Brian's favorite phrase was, "Back in BC, we never did it that way." He made several attempts to get Petey fired. He'd walk into my office and say things like, "Petey decided, insert decision here. Isn't that a terrible idea? In BC, this would never happen." I always told him I stood by Petey's decisions. Eventually, things escalated to Brian regularly screaming at Petey. He'd get furious over some minor issue and blow up. A few times he even stormed out, slamming doors, shouting that Petey could go to hell and that he was quitting to return to BC. But after a couple hours, he'd cool down and come back. At Petey's request, everyone pretended nothing had happened. "He just needs to let off steam," Petey would say. Despite everything, Petey stayed patient with Brian. The morning show still had decent numbers, plenty of listeners, and solid ratings. My team sold lots of ad spots at good prices, and everyone was making money. Petey was willing to tolerate Brian acting like a raging monster as long as the performance remained strong. But here's the truth. The show wasn't actually that good. The ratings were high only because we had almost no competition in that radio format. That changed a few years later when a competing station launched their own morning show. Our numbers tanked. What used to be the leading program in our target demographic suddenly had real rivals. I'm not sure Brian even noticed, but my team and I definitely did. Demand drives pricing, and suddenly we had a product with weaker demand, meaning cheaper ad rates and fewer advertisers. Eventually, my boss noticed too. A group of managers, including Petey and me, decided that something had to change. If this had been a corporate station, Brian and his co-host would have been fired long ago. But this was a privately owned company run by people who cared about their staff. They wanted to keep both morning hosts employed, Brian included, at their current pay, just in different on-air roles across our cluster. For several weeks, management already knew the morning show would be restructured, but we hadn't yet finalized the new lineup. Only the leadership team was aware of the coming changes. Brian had no idea he was about to be reassigned. Then one morning, right after the show ended at 9 a.m., Brian walked into Petey's office to discuss the schedule for weekend appearances. We called them remotes, on-site broadcasts that helped radio hosts earn some extra cash. You probably heard these.
Hey everyone, this is Chicken Boy, coming to you live from Salmonella Chrysler Ford Jeep. That's how those remote broadcasts usually sounded. Advertisers paid hosts separately for these appearances. At the time, the standard pay was about $100 per hour. So a host could sit in a car showroom for a 2-hour broadcast, chat with salespeople, and walk out with $200 in cash. Most weekends had 5 or 6 of these gigs. Petey was the one assigning hosts to the remotes. He tried to split them as fairly as possible so everyone had a chance to earn extra money. Brian constantly tried to grab more than his share, and more often than not, he got what he wanted. One Tuesday, right after Petey posted the schedule for the upcoming weekend, Brian stormed into his office. Petey's office was just 2 doors down from mine. Brian demanded to know why he'd been given so few remotes. Petey calmly told him that he already had 2 out of the 6 for that weekend. But that wasn't enough for Brian. Moments later, he barged into my office and said something like, "Don't you think advertisers would prefer the top morning show host for their event instead of some random overnight DJ? Back in BC, that's how it worked." I replied, "Assigning talent to remotes is Petey's responsibility. He makes the right call for both the advertisers and the station." Brian scoffed, spun around, and blasted back toward Petey's office, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. From my desk, I heard him yell, "Aw, screw this! You're an idiot! I quit! I'm going back to BC!" Then he burst out, stormed through the lobby, and headed straight to the dealership loaner car, the promotional vehicle the station provided him to drive. I walked over to Petey's office. "He's just blowing off steam, right?" I asked. Petey looked unusually serious. "You heard what he said? He said he quits. I'm pretty sure half the building heard it too." Then Petey said, "Come with me to accounting." Of course, I knew exactly what was coming. Brian had resigned verbally in front of both of us, and Petey had a witness. In accounting, our bookkeeper, Dolores, said it would be best for Petey to write a formal memo documenting what happened and officially accept Brian's resignation on behalf of the company. I wasn't at the station when Brian eventually came back. I'd gone to a sales meeting. But here's what Petey and the receptionist later told me. Several hours after his meltdown, Brian strolled in as if nothing had happened. He tried entering through the employee door, but his code no longer worked. So he circled around to the main entrance and came in through the front lobby. He tried his access code again at the inner door. Still dead. The receptionist called Petey. Petey arrived carrying paperwork. Right there in the front lobby, he said, "Brian, your resignation has been accepted. Here are the documents. Please sign." Brian froze, stunned. He signed without saying a word. Petey continued, "We'll also need the keys to the dealership vehicle you were driving." Brian slid the key off his ring and handed it over. "We'll pack up your belongings from your desk and the car. Should we send them to your current address or forward them to BC?" Brian whispered, "My current address," with tears in his eyes. The receptionist ordered a taxi for him. Brian sat outside the station crying until it arrived. He later tried to get a job at another radio station in town, but as far as I know, nothing ever worked out. I have no idea where he is now or what he's doing. His former co-host is still in radio, hosting afternoon shows on another station. We replaced Brian's show with something better, and the ratings bounced back. The dealership promotion was moved to daytime, and the midday host happily drove the sponsored car around for another 3 months.
My sister-in-law stole 2,000 euros from me and my husband, and then called us cruel, selfish monsters for wanting the money back. This happened in a large German city. My husband's sister is 55, and her equally useless husband is 57. They're always broke and constantly whining about it. For more than 10 years, they've been running to the family with their hands out, expecting someone else to pay their bills.
Their household debt is well into six-figure territory. My sister-in-law is a trained physical therapist, and her husband is the kind of man who insists that because of his skin color and age, he shouldn't even bother applying for jobs. No one will hire me anyway. Whenever someone asks why neither of them works, she always says her back hurts, and he claims his knees are bad. He's in his 50s, not 90, and his claim of no jobs for people like me is pure nonsense. I used to work at a staffing agency and personally sent him several positions he was perfectly qualified for. He refused all of them because 20 euros an hour is too low. That would have been over 3,000 euros a month before taxes. But apparently, standing up from the couch wasn't worth it. Anyway, summer. Her birthday's coming up. We're hosting a family barbecue. She gathers everyone and launches into a speech. She wants to buy a car and asks the family for 8,000 euros, plus another 3,000 euros for a luxury massage mat. And of course, this time she promises she'll actually pay the money back. We ask why she even needs a car and how she's planning to pay for insurance, fuel, taxes, and maintenance when she has no income. She replies, "My husband is American. He refuses to use public transport. He's used to driving and he needs a car to visit friends. Public transport is unbearable for him." When we ask how they expect to afford a car beyond the initial purchase, she becomes hostile and starts insulting us. According to her, we're cruel for asking humiliating questions and trying to make her feel inferior. And besides, she offered to repay it, so what's the problem? She eventually bursts into tears and storms into the house. I also went inside a few minutes later, and I did not hear crying. I heard her on the phone with her husband, who didn't attend the barbecue. She was telling him how we were supposedly bullying her, patronizing her, and treating her like garbage. Then she came back outside, smirking, put her phone on speaker, and held it out for the whole family. And her husband started yelling, "Just wait, you bunch of freaks! Talking behind my back and making my wife cry. I swear I'll kick all your asses. I hate every one of you." She stood there grinning like she'd won something. Fast forward to her birthday, and because we were still doormats back then, we decided to make her dream of a car come true. So we gifted her a €100 credit for a car-sharing service. Everything was set up in her name. She was the only insured driver. We explained the rules clearly. She said she understood and promised to update her payment details once the €100 ran out. Of course, she lied. She never changed the payment info and, predictably, let her lazy husband drive the car too. After a couple of months, the charges ballooned to €2,000, all on our account. When I discovered the withdrawals, I immediately revoked access and confronted her. She ignored every call, every message, every email. But she kept complaining to my husband, her brother, saying that my evil wife wouldn't let her poor family use the car in peace. She even told him, "I haven't slept in 3 nights because your wife keeps demanding her precious money back. It's unbelievable." A few weeks later, her husband responded to my email. He called me a bitch, a witch, said I'd beat the shit out of me so I'd finally shut up about the money. According to him, I needed therapy because I was crazy. He kept threatening that I'd get a few punches soon if I didn't stop bothering them. Then this aggressive idiot actually showed up at our house and tried to intimidate me. I should mention he already has a record for violent behavior. I filed a police report, and what did my husband's family do? They attacked me. Why would you provoke him? Don't poke the bear. This is your fault. You two earn enough anyway. Why can't you just gift them the money? My mother-in-law even suggested begging the extended family for donations so the poor couple could finally get the money and stop being bothered by us. Naturally, my sister-in-law and her husband didn't pay back a single euro, not even an apology. Instead, they launched a full smear campaign against us. Now, every time I bring it up, my husband's family rolls their eyes and insists it's my fault, that I was overreacting, that I was dramatic, that I'm the villain.
And yes, some of them even called me a crazy bitch. That's what I get for wanting our stolen 2,000 euros back.
Everything finally blew up a couple of months later when my sister-in-law and her husband showed up at my father-in-law's birthday and turned it into a circus. They started shouting that the whole family was persecuting them and warned that we'd all regret it soon. More threats, as usual. Her husband tried to start fights with every man at the party, swinging his chest around, threatening to beat them up, and provoking my husband to hit him. Of course, he failed. He's a coward. The only thing he managed to do was shove another brother's wife to the ground. He never dared approach the men. Pathetic. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law was screaming at me, insisting that I had personally destroyed the family. She asked me mockingly if I was proud of the damage I'd done. A little later, her husband came running toward me, yelling that he would do anything to protect his family and that he'd smash my face in. I called the police. The moment they heard the sirens, both of them vanished. It took 3 long years before we finally got our money back from my mother-in-law, who gave it to us with the most condescending attitude imaginable. She grumbled, complained, acted as if we were greedy beggars, but eventually paid. She essentially bailed out her grown daughter, who never takes responsibility for anything. Recently, my charming sister-in-law came crawling back again, claiming she had severe depression because of the way we supposedly treated her. Honestly, maybe the real cause is her manipulative, violent husband who abuses her and fights with everyone he meets. She said my negative energy was so overwhelming she had to check into a psychiatric clinic. I told her to leave and take her melodrama somewhere else. My husband also made it clear he no longer has time for her manipulations. I now understand why my husband's family brushed off the theft of 2,000 euros. Years earlier, my sister-in-law stole 20,000 euros from her own daughter, the girl's entire college fund. When the daughter asked where the money went, her mother just shrugged and said, "I needed it." I now cut all contact with my husband's extended family. He only speaks to a few relatives. I finally feel free of these parasites. And honestly, except for my husband, his family is trash. They excuse theft, tolerate verbal and physical abuse, and constantly swap victim and aggressor. I will never sit at the same table with them again. Update. The saga didn't end. Recently, my mother-in-law passed away. My sister-in-law and her husband showed up at the funeral, despite the fact that he openly told my mother-in-law while she was alive that he despised her. The family had asked him not to come, out of respect, but he strutted into the chapel like he owned the place and sat in the front row, the row reserved for immediate blood relatives. My sister-in-law started screaming at people who told him to move, announcing that she was the firstborn and therefore had privileges, including bringing her husband wherever she wanted. According to her, she alone had the right to dictate how the ceremony should be held. And then there was her husband's outfit, a blue polyester pinstripe suit, not elegant, more like cheap gangster style, sunglasses indoors, a baby blue faux fur hat, and a cane with a fake silver handle. He looked like he was auditioning for a low-budget pimp movie. He clearly wanted attention, but the mourners told him to keep his mouth shut. During the burial, he didn't even approach the grave. He sat aside, glaring at everyone, turning his head away when people tried to speak to him, refusing to shake hands. Why he came at all is beyond me. A small family gathering was planned afterward, without my sister-in-law and her husband, but my mother-in-law's elderly sister, who knew very well it was supposed to be private, suddenly decided to invite everyone from the funeral. Naturally, my sister-in-law and her husband took that as a personal invitation. Free food, of course. And since they lack any sense of dignity or restraint, my sister-in-law and her younger daughter found it appropriate to scream at my husband, who had just buried his mother, because he didn't want their precious patriarch at the funeral. They shrieked like banshees in the middle of the street. 20 minutes had passed since the burial, the grave wasn't even fully covered, and they were demanding that my husband apologize immediately for not inviting them. Her husband watched with pleasure while mother and daughter put on the show. He finally got the narcissistic boost he craved. While walking toward the gathering place, still yelling at my husband, they accused him of being insane for letting his wife file a fake police report against their innocent family man. My sister-in-law's 18-year-old daughter flipped him off, insulted him repeatedly, and called him crazy, all while he was grieving. His husband observed it all with a satisfied smirk. His poison now runs in both his wife's and daughter's veins. The funeral was probably the best day of his life. 2 psychologists later diagnosed him as both a narcissist and a sociopath. And finally, I partially blame my sister-in-law for my mother-in-law's sudden death. My MIL had lung cancer and struggled to breathe. 3 days before her death, she called her daughter, my sister-in-law, and begged her to apologize to me and my husband for the stolen money, hoping for some peace in the family. My sister-in-law screamed at her so violently that an ambulance had to be called. My MIL went into respiratory distress from the emotional shock. She died 2 days later.
I was mistaken for a Disneyland employee, and someone actually tried to fire me. This happened almost 3 years ago. I had the chance to attend the soft opening of Shanghai Disneyland a couple of weeks before its official launch. I went with a youth group from my church. It was a great day. The park wasn't crowded, and we rode most of the main attractions with only 20-30 minutes of waiting. By the end of the day, everyone was exhausted from walking, so we decided to stop by the only gift shop that was open. It was in Tomorrowland, and since it was a trial run for friends and family of the staff, the shop only had sample items, one of each product that would later appear in the regular stores. Every sample had a tag with the product number, name, and price. Signs everywhere instructed guests to write the item numbers, quantities, and sizes on the provided sheets and give them to an actual employee who would fetch the real merchandise from the back. For context, I attended an international English-speaking private school in Shanghai, so my English was much stronger than most local kids. While wandering through the store, I noticed a girl I knew from inter-school sports events. She was with a woman I assumed was her mom. They were digging through a bin of plush toys, so I helped them find the one they wanted. Halfway through, I sensed someone standing behind me. I ignored it, thinking it was a family member of theirs, and wrote down the number for the Mickey plush they wanted. They walked off happy, and I continued browsing the pile. Maybe something would catch my eye, too. When I finally straightened up to go find my group, I was met with the fakest, most strained smile I had ever seen. The woman who'd been hovering behind me was suddenly inches from my face, so close I could feel her hot, sour breath on my collarbone. It was weird, but I was tired and assumed she was just awkwardly trying to look friendly. I muttered a quick sorry and stepped aside. That's when she shouted, "Hey, you!" And then I felt it. Her sweaty, sticky fingers with long acrylic nails clamping around my arm. I turned around slowly and was immediately slapped in the face by a t-shirt she shoved toward me. "You need these shirts in a size L, and your selection is terrible. There's barely anything here." "What?" was all I managed before she snapped again. "Just check in the back. I know you have more." I looked around. Her 2 kids were standing behind her with their arms full of sample toys. She had 3 shirts draped over her arms. Several shoppers, maybe a dozen, had stopped what they were doing to stare. "You're not supposed to touch these. They're samples. The signs literally say not to." "You don't get to tell me what I can and can't buy. Who's in charge here? Get your manager. Clearly, you're not trained." "I don't work here. I was just helping a friend." "So you only work for customers who are your friends?" I blinked. "What?" Right then, one of the guys from my church group called out to me in Chinese, asking if I was done. I decided it wasn't worth the energy and headed toward him. Behind me, she shrieked, "Stop!" And then louder, "You're supposed to help me, not them. You speak English. You should be helping an American customer, not one of your Chinese people. And I can't even find the sizes I want." 2 things enraged me instantly. First, the way she said, "your Chinese people," like she was complaining to her PTA friends about someone else's child being better than hers. Second, she completely ignored everything I said and contradicted herself, calling me untrained because I didn't work there, then insisting I was literally trained to serve her specifically. Without turning around, I snapped, "I don't work here, and you're acting like a..."
Then I faced her and added, "And none of this is my problem." I heard a dramatic gasp like something out of a sitcom and saw her lunge toward me. For a moment, I genuinely worried her 90 kilos were about to crush my scrawny 60 kilos. She swung the t-shirt on its hanger at me like a weapon. Instinct kicked in. I lifted my hands and awkwardly caught it mid-swing, shoved her arm away, and bolted straight for the exit. At that moment, I was shaking with fear and confusion. No one, aside from my own mother during my bratty toddler years, had ever tried to hit me like that.
I found my friends near the keychain display and tried to blend into the crowd while quickly telling them about the lunatic who just tried to attack me. After I failed to convince everyone to leave immediately, they handed their purchase sheets to a real store employee, and that's when I heard it. A shrill, drawn-out scream delivered in the tone people use when they talk to someone they think is mentally impaired. "Your worker assaulted me." Every word was punctuated with wild hand flailing. I saw the poor manager, already looking like he was one complaint away from a meltdown after a full day of angry Disney fans shouting in languages he barely understood. At that exact moment, I got one more insult hurled at me from the woman for running away, and something inside me snapped. I decided I wasn't letting her intimidate me again. I walked up to the manager and calmly said in Chinese, "She's crazy. She tried to hit me because she assumed I work here and got angry when I didn't help her." Meanwhile, the woman was screeching at him, "It's her! It's her!" The manager almost completely ignored her. I was the only one speaking a language he understood. He said he would call security, but there wasn't any staff available right then. She kept screaming that he was discriminating against her because he wasn't speaking to her while I was discussing with him what to do. Then she completely lost it. She grabbed the manager by the arms and started shaking him, demanding that he fire me. The manager shoved her off, pointed a finger in her face, and said, in his broken English, "No touch." She froze, stunned, stumbled back a few steps, and then dramatically collapsed onto the floor. Then came the theatrics. She flailed her arms and wailed like a toddler mid-tantrum. Shoppers from all over the store, including the girl I helped earlier, my entire church group, and several employees gathered around to watch her roll and scream on the ground. She paused occasionally to check whether people were still watching, then immediately went back to shrieking. Locals pulled out their phones the moment they realized a hysterical foreign woman was causing a spectacle in Disneyland. When she noticed that nobody pitied her, that people were only filming her meltdown, she snapped again. "I have never been so humiliated. 6 years in China. You people are awful." She jabbed her sausage-like finger at me. 6 years, and this is what I get?" 6 years in China, and she still hadn't learned a single word of Chinese. How did she even function? I muttered the only thing my brain could come up with, "Yeah, go to hell." But of course, she wasn't done. "No, you go to hell. You're a rude brat. My husband will have you fired. You ruined my boy's day." "Sure, I don't even work here. I don't owe you anything." She was still sitting on the floor when I turned around, walked back to my group, and said in Chinese, "Let's go." We left and headed to the cheesecake factory, where I told the rest of the story. Our group leader scolded me for being rude, but admitted she was even a bigger... Edit, for clarity. My entire group, including me, was wearing white Mickey Mouse t-shirts from Uniqlo. Yes, technically Disney-themed, but nothing like a uniform. All actual employees were wearing Mickey ears, sailor hats, and name tags. A lot of people assumed she was just a rude tourist, but she was definitely an expat. Probably a wealthy one, too. The opening was only accessible to people with ties to Disney, sponsors, or the companies that designed or built the park. Someone in our church group was an architect who designed most of the restaurants, and that's how we got in. The girl I helped earlier? Her dad was a high-ranking executive at a car company sponsoring one of the attractions. So that woman, Or her husband must have had personal or business connections too. That's the only way she got inside.
My uncle has been draining money from my 100-year-old grandfather's bank account every single month. My grandfather, on my mom's side, had 2 children, my mother and my uncle. My grandmother passed away more than 30 years ago, and my mom died 3 years ago. Until last year, my grandfather was living with my uncle, a drug addict, in a rundown apartment outside my city. Almost 2 years ago, my uncle collapsed and badly injured his hip when he fell. He needed surgery and a long rehabilitation. Only then did my cousin and I fully realize the horrifying conditions my grandfather had been living in. The apartment wasn't just messy, it was a genuine biohazard. Filthy clothes, blood-stained rags, smells that made you gag, the place was uninhabitable. It took a few months to sort everything out, but last year I finally managed to bring my grandfather home with me. We had to completely undress him, change him into clean clothes, walk him barefoot to the car, and forbid him from taking anything from the apartment except his walker, wallet, phone, charger, and glasses case. Thankfully, we didn't bring any bedbugs along. My uncle protested, of course, but what was he going to do? Anyone he called, any agency, any authority, would have seen the state of that apartment. Best case scenario, he'd be evicted. Worst case, arrested. My grandfather was in such terrible shape that I was 100% sure all I could do was let him spend his final days or weeks somewhere clean and peaceful. Instead, he went from a size M to a size XL, celebrated his 100th birthday, and is still alive and surprisingly cheerful. My uncle used to claim my grandfather wasn't hungry, but the moment he was away from someone constantly telling him there was no money for food, he regained a perfectly normal appetite. He mostly wanted pudding, and the doctor said to let him eat whatever he wanted. I bought him a proper bed, a mattress, new clothes, new wardrobes to store everything, a comfortable chair, and a table. He still uses the Android phone I bought him shortly after my mother passed away. He couldn't use hers anymore. He never remembers how to make calls or send texts, but he can answer the phone and enjoys browsing the internet. His SIM card is registered under my name, and I pay the whole bill. I don't charge him for utilities or any other living expenses. My roommate gave him a mini fridge, a nightstand, and 2 lamps he wasn't using. My brother bought him a TV and brought an old TV stand from his garage. His grandkids and great-grandkids can finally visit him, something impossible before, when no one could even step into that disaster of an apartment. We threw 2 big parties, one for his 100th birthday and one for Father's Day. We have 4 cats, and they visit him throughout the day, which he loves. I registered him to vote at my address and send in his mail-in ballots for every election. I managed to get him enrolled in a VA home care program. Now doctors come to the house, do checkups, give vaccines, draw blood, all the things my uncle would never allow because you couldn't let a medical professional into that level of filth. A social worker came to document his end-of-life care preferences. A caregiver comes 3 times a week to help with bathing, shaving, and hygiene. And we even found a podiatrist who does home visits for seniors. Elderly toenails get insanely thick and hard. You can't just clip them like normal, so now his feet no longer look horrifying. When we moved him, my uncle handed over his debit card. He must have realized I'd cancel it and order a new one anyway. A few weeks before the move, I had taken one of my grandfather's bank statements from the apartment, so I had his account number and he knew his social security number. Thank God, otherwise I couldn't even refill his prescriptions over the phone. With his permission, I set up mobile banking on my phone to keep track of his balance and the deposits from Social Security and his military pension. His main expenses are medications, grocery delivery, and $300 a month to a debt collector. Because, of course, years ago he once gave my mother his credit card and she drank herself to death, leaving the debt unpaid for years. We received a letter shortly after updating his address. The debt was in his name, and I didn't want him harassed while alive or leave problems after he's gone, so I arranged a payment plan online. In 3 months, it will be fully paid off. My uncle also left several of my grandfather's medical bills unpaid and eventually set up a tiny monthly payment, just enough to keep collectors off his back. Paying the full amount would mean he'd have less extra money left to steal.
I paid off that debt in full. Naturally, my uncle had been taking every bit of money my grandfather had while they lived together. In the first month after I moved Grandpa in with me, my uncle tried to claim that he still had to pay half the rent because his name is on the lease. I double-checked and even called the property manager using the number posted in their lobby. I explained why we had to move my grandfather out and asked when their lease expired. The manager sounded confused. Grandpa's name wasn't on the lease at all, only my uncle's. What a surprise. My uncle never replied to my message where I called out his ridiculous lie, but just because Grandpa no longer lived with him didn't mean the money demands stopped. For starters, my uncle had already added Grandpa's debit card to his Grubhub account, so he kept ordering food several times a month. And before that, he'd been doing it nearly every day until I finally snapped and confronted him. They both also use the same payment app. Grandpa doesn't really understand how it works, but whenever my uncle asks for money, Grandpa agrees automatically, and I'm the one who ends up sending it because otherwise Grandpa gets extremely anxious and upset. He doesn't have dementia, and for a man who just turned 100, his cognition is shockingly good. He forgets what day it is and sometimes repeats the same question 3 times in a minute, but he recognizes everyone, reads, watches TV, communicates normally, knows what he needs. The only issue is that he's never been able to say no when it comes to money, especially to my mom and my uncle. They always treated him like an ATM. If I just banned him from giving money or blocked my uncle's number, it would devastate him. So my uncle keeps begging for cash every month, usually starting in the middle of it, and he always gets something. Tonight, Grandpa agreed to send him $56. Except he doesn't have any money left, and neither do I. My paycheck is in 2 days. I didn't tell Grandpa he was at zero because he wouldn't understand why and would panic. Instead, I listed every expense for the month and sent the breakdown to my uncle to show that the account was empty and that I wasn't stealing anything. Between his Grubhub orders and the non-stop begging, my uncle drained $789.34 in a single month, from a 100-year-old father he had practically neglected into the ground. The only money I used was $35 for 2 Uber rides on different days so I could get home faster and cook dinner for Grandpa. He always tells me, "My money is your money. You take care of me. Use it however you need." I would never drain his account, but occasionally I use a few dollars just to get home quickly to cook or take care of the house. I never spend it on myself. And what did my uncle say? That I shouldn't have set up a payment plan for that old credit card debt at all? No one is going to come after a 100-year-old man. Not paying debts is basically his life philosophy. When the electric bill arrived while he was in the hospital, he told me, just throw them $50 so they don't shut the lights off. Instead, I paid the full amount, over $200 from Grandpa's card, because I didn't believe for a second that that's how utilities work. And the idea of Grandpa sitting alone in a dark apartment terrified me far more than the idea of my uncle having less money to leech. I showed all the numbers to my sisters and my dad. They agree it's awful, but none of us know how to stop it because Grandpa simply cannot tell his son no. And the only alternative is cutting my uncle off entirely, which would emotionally wreck Grandpa. Is it worth the damage? Is it safe for him? We're not worried that my uncle would call the police or anything. He never risks involving outsiders in his business. What we fear is how Grandpa would react, whether he'd start seeing me as the enemy or become distressed. That would make living together nearly impossible. It feels like the only way to stop his son from draining him dry, even though we're furious that he's using his father to fund his addiction. People love to say, your kids will take care of you in old age. Yeah, sure. There were no more updates to that story.
My grandparents gave me a trip to Rome, but my parents forced me to hand it over to my golden child sister. She ended up crashing on the way to the airport, so I took my ticket back and went anyway. Hi, I'm 18, and for my birthday, my grandparents on my dad's side gifted me a plane ticket to Rome plus a check for travel expenses. I was beyond excited, but the very next day, my parents started pressuring me to be selfless and give the trip to my older sister, June. She's 21 and the golden child of the family, if that wasn't already obvious. Their excuse? June is studying architecture, and seeing Rome in person would be an amazing opportunity for her resume and her language skills. I pointed out that I'm going into literature, and Rome would be just as valuable for me, but they didn't care. The kicker? June had already been given the same choice at 18. Grandparents offered her a trip abroad, but she turned it down and asked for cash instead. My turn finally came, and suddenly I'm not allowed to enjoy it. For weeks, the arguments dragged on. My parents guilt-tripped me, listing every sacrifice they've made for me, calling it a small favor to give up this trip. I resisted at first, until one day they slipped up and said they didn't want the trip wasted on me. That broke me. Basically, if I went, it was worthless, but if June went, it mattered. They tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. Eventually, I gave in and said, fine, whatever. I figured there was no way the airline would even allow them to change the ticket, so I still had my check at least. But somehow, they pulled strings. On the day of the flight, June showed up with my boarding pass and headed to the airport instead. And then, karma hit. On the way, we got a call. June had been in a car accident. Apparently, she grabbed the steering wheel of the taxi because she thought the driver was taking the wrong route. The car spun out and hit a tree. June walked away with scratches, but the poor driver took the full impact. Broken arm, deep head gash, hospitalized. He's suing her now, and my parents are panicking, trying to cover the damages with their savings. When they told me what happened, I snapped. The words just slipped out. That's karma for forcing me to give up Rome. They were horrified, told me I was heartless, that words carry weight, and now they finally saw my true selfish nature. Hypocrisy much? They literally told me my trip would be wasted if I went, but apparently that wasn't cruel. Furious, I grabbed a small bag, ordered a taxi, and headed to the hospital myself. I realized in that moment, no matter what I did, my family would never see me as worthy or equal, so why keep sacrificing for them? When I arrived, June was busy spinning her version of the accident to the cops, trying to claim it wasn't her fault. I didn't even bother arguing. I just walked up and asked her one thing. Do you still have my boarding pass? Update. My grandparents gave me a trip to Rome. My parents forced me to give it to my golden child's sister. She crashed on the way to the airport, and I ended up taking the ticket back and flying anyway. So, yeah, here's what happened next. When I confronted June at the hospital, she looked completely stunned and confused. I didn't even wait for her to respond. I grabbed her bag, dug through it, and found my boarding pass. Without another word, I bolted out, jumped into the taxi, and rushed straight to the airport. I barely made it in time, but somehow, against all odds, I ended up on the plane. And then it hit me. I was actually flying to Rome. I didn't check my phone until I landed. And wow, my family is furious. My parents think I'm a heartless monster because, in their words, I abandoned my sister after the accident. The accident she caused herself, might I add. June is pissed because she claims I stole her chance, when in reality, she stole mine first. All I did was take back what was mine to begin with.
Apparently, the family consensus is that I was wrong and owe everyone an apology. June even texted me that her parents are draining their savings to pay off the taxi driver who's suing her for damages, and that I should be helpful by handing over the birthday check my grandparents gave me. According to her, I'm selfish for traveling while the family is suffering. But honestly, I don't think I owe anyone anything. To answer some of the questions people had, the boarding pass issue. I'm 99% sure my parents never actually figured out how to legally transfer the ticket. June probably just planned to show up and bluff her way through security. If they'd really switched the booking, I wouldn't have been able to board with my passport. So their plan was just smoke and mirrors, and it backfired. Why I still live at home? It's complicated. I grew up believing that if I just tried harder, my parents would eventually treat me like they treat June. I spent 18 years trying to earn their love, never realizing how toxic that mindset was. Moving in with my grandparents never seemed like an option. They lived far out of town, and honestly, I thought keeping the peace with my parents was my best shot. Spoiler, it wasn't. But now I'm realizing I don't have to live like this anymore. My relationship with June? We've never been close. I don't hate her, she doesn't hate me, we just don't get along. She's always been controlling, the kind of person who had to sit in the front seat even on family trips. So of course she tried to take the wheel from the taxi driver because she thought she knew the faster route. That's exactly the kind of thing she does. And yes, my parents aren't doing great financially. Mom's a nurse, dad's a high school football coach. They rely heavily on my grandparents' help. Now, with this lawsuit hanging over them, they're in real trouble. If they want financial help from my grandparents, they'll have to admit what actually happened, which I doubt they're eager to do.
Update number 1. I've had a couple of days to think it over, and honestly, I've decided not to waste this trip worrying about my parents or June. This is probably the last chance I'll get for years. Once I start college, I won't have this kind of freedom again. So I'm going to enjoy Rome. My sister made her choices, my parents made theirs. For once in my life, I'm choosing me. Update number 2. My Rome trip changed everything. Now I live with my grandparents. They're adults and they can deal with their own mess. It's not my fault they tried to take something that was never theirs to begin with and ended up facing the consequences. You guys were right. It was foolish of me to ever expect them to appreciate my sacrifice. They'll always resent me no matter what I do. So why should I keep giving up my happiness for them? Right now, I'm having the best time of my life in Rome. This morning, I finally opened up to my grandparents about everything. How my parents have treated me all these years, how they've always put June first, and how I was constantly overlooked. Even my closest friends never knew the full story. So telling my grandparents felt like a huge weight lifted off my chest. They were shocked that it had gone on for so long and that I kept quiet. I told them I always thought if I just stay quiet and keep trying to be the perfect daughter, eventually my parents will love me too. But now I finally understand. That day will never come. My grandparents told me I did the right thing. They insisted that when I come back from Rome, I should go straight to their house instead of my parents'. They said they'll make all the arrangements for me to move in with them. When I reminded them that I'll be starting college in the fall, they smiled and said that's not a problem. They'll cover all my expenses themselves. That one conversation literally changed my life. For the first time, I know where I'll belong when I return. My parents are furious, of course. They never planned to pay for my college anyway. They had told me from the start that, since they already paid for June's education, I was on my own. But now it doesn't matter. I'll be okay. Update number 3. My trip ended a few days ago, and I'm officially living with my grandparents. When I got back, I went straight to their house, and to my surprise, they had already prepared a guest room for me and even hired movers to bring all my things from my parents' place. They welcomed me so warmly, I almost cried.
They told me what happened after our phone call. Apparently, the night of June's accident, my parents had called my grandparents asking for help. They didn't want to dip into their own savings or risk a lawsuit, especially since the dashcam footage clearly showed June was at fault. The only way out was a settlement, but the taxi driver was asking for a huge sum. When they all met, my grandparents first asked my parents about me, whether it was true they had always treated me unfairly and even forced me to give up my Rome trip. My parents tried to brush it off, saying it wasn't the time to discuss me since I was off partying in Rome. But my grandparents pressed, and eventually my parents snapped and admitted everything. They said yes, it was true, but claimed I deserved it, because I abandoned the family when things got hard. They accused me of showing up at the hospital only to snatch the boarding pass, not caring about June. They even said I'd always been jealous because June was better at everything. Then they called me spoiled and selfish, and told my grandparents that when I returned, they wouldn't tolerate me anymore. That was the final straw. My grandparents cut ties with them on the spot. My parents told them if they wanted to take me in, then fine, because they were done with me anyway. Hearing all this broke my heart. Deep down, I always knew my parents didn't care about me, but having them outright say it, that hurt more than I can describe. I cried so much that night. But through it all, my grandparents stood by me. They've shown me what family is supposed to feel like. For the first time in my life, I finally feel safe. This is my home now until I leave for college in a couple of months. And honestly, I couldn't be more grateful. Update number 4. My grandparents completely changed my life, and my parents got a reality check. When I leave for college, I won't have to worry about a thing. My grandparents are covering all my expenses. Since returning, I haven't spoken to my parents or June at all. I didn't even read their last messages because I wanted to just enjoy my trip. June's messages were all the same, calling me selfish, spoiled, worthless, and saying she's glad she doesn't have to deal with me anymore because I'm unworthy of her company. Honestly, I think she got it backwards. She's the one unworthy of mine. But I really don't care. The words that hurt most come from my parents, though even their words no longer surprise me.
They sent messages accusing me of being heartless, saying they should have stopped me at the hospital, claiming it was their fault for not raising me properly, and pointing out that even at the hospital, I escaped to go on the trip. They kept repeating things like, "We did everything to give you a comfortable life." Comfortable life doesn't equal good childhood, I thought. Sure, they fed me, clothed me, and put a roof over my head, but that doesn't erase years of neglect, favoritism, and emotional harm. They said I complained out of jealousy of June, and therefore calling them villains was unfair. Then they concluded by calling me a void, saying I wasted their time and energy, and now they're finally happy without me. It stung, and I nearly cried. But after talking with my grandparents, I promised myself I would no longer let their cruel words break me. I blocked my parents, cutting off all contact. I need to start healing and maybe erase their toxic influence from my mind. I don't know if I can do it completely, but I will try. The funniest, most insane part happened today. It's been almost 2 weeks since I returned from Rome. I had no clue what was going on with my parents or June. I assumed they were still scrambling money for the taxi settlement. But today, out of nowhere, my parents showed up at my grandparents' house, clearly ready for revenge. Thankfully, they didn't even acknowledge me. They went straight to the living room where my grandparents were. I froze, unsure what to do, but my grandparents told me to sit with them. They could see the looks on my parents' faces, annoyance, anger, but nothing was said out loud. When my grandparents asked why they had come, the parents said they still expected compensation for all the money they supposedly spent on me over the years. They pulled out documents claiming I owed them almost $120,000 for raising me. I was floored. The audacity. These were the people who had done the bare minimum, and now they were trying to profit off of it? My grandparents calmly asked to speak privately, leaving me out. After a few tense minutes, they came back and said they were willing to pay, but only if my parents returned all the money they had borrowed from my grandparents over the years. That was it.
My parents were completely blindsided and I couldn't stop laughing. Eventually, they shouted, slammed the door, and left. I don't think they'll be back anytime soon, and honestly, it doesn't matter. My grandparents have proven they can handle them, and my father being their only son doesn't change anything. I leave for college in a few months, and for the first time in my life, I'm genuinely excited. Looking back, going to Rome was probably the best decision I've ever made. It not only gave me an amazing trip, but also helped me finally claim my life and freedom.
I threw out my pregnant sister-in-law's food. My brother and his wife, Laura, who's 7 months pregnant, have been staying with us for about a week while he interviews for a job in our city. My kids adore having their aunt and uncle around, and everything had been going smoothly. Yesterday, Laura went grocery shopping and came back with several bags. I thanked her, but told her it really wasn't necessary. Our kitchen is already stocked, and their company is more than enough. She said she wanted to buy food herself, and most of the items were things she was seriously craving. As I helped her unpack, I noticed almost everything contained peanuts. Cookies, crackers, peanut butter, even some kind of peanut-filled cake. My stomach dropped, because she knows my 8-year-old son has a severe peanut allergy. We don't keep anything with peanuts in the house. When he was younger, we had a medical emergency that nearly cost his life. Ever since then, peanuts are a hard no. I tried not to be rude, but I told her I wasn't comfortable having that stuff in my home. Laura insisted she'd be careful. She wouldn't eat it around him or the other kids. She'd clean up afterward, she promised. She said her pregnancy cravings were intense and she really needed these snacks. Look, I have 4 kids. I know pregnancy cravings can be weird. I personally never had any that extreme, but every woman is different. I explained everything to my son and told him not to touch her snacks or be near her when she ate them. Fine. Problem solved. Or so I thought. This morning, I went downstairs early to make breakfast. I opened the fridge and found strawberries covered in peanut butter sitting right on the shelf with no container. Next to them, an open jar of peanut butter with the lid barely hanging on, and a plate of cold, soggy peanut butter sandwiches because apparently she likes them that way. I was furious. I've read enough about airborne allergens to know this was not safe. I grabbed a trash bag and started dumping everything inside. Her food, our food, all of it. I didn't care. I planned to take the bag straight to a shelter and explain why I couldn't keep it. Laura walked in while I was still fuming and asked what I was doing. I didn't hide my anger. She immediately got defensive, saying I had no right to throw away her food, that her baby needed it, and that I was being cruel to a pregnant woman. I told her point blank that I didn't care. If she couldn't respect my rules or my child's safety, then her cravings were not my problem. My kid could die. She stormed upstairs, packed her things, came back down, grabbed the bag of food, and left in tears. My brother called about half an hour later during a break in his interview. He was upset with both of us, said everyone was overreacting and that our son was still perfectly fine. When my husband came home, I told him everything, and he immediately took my side. So, was I wrong? Before we move on to the update, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Honestly, I can understand both sides here. If I were the pregnant woman, I'd probably feel humiliated and confused too. Someone throwing away all the groceries I bought, including my own food, because of a few peanut butter snacks? I'd be annoyed. But I also fully understand the mom. You simply cannot risk your child's life just to satisfy someone else's cravings. The unborn baby doesn't need peanut butter. It's a craving, not a medical necessity. Looking at the situation logically, the mom was right to prioritize her son's safety. Severe allergies are no joke, and if airborne peanut particles are even a small possibility, she had to act. The pregnant woman showed a shocking level of carelessness. So what do you think? Whose side are you on? Update 1. As many commenters predicted, Laura immediately ran to my family to complain. To her credit, she didn't twist the story. She told it exactly as it happened. and my mother was furious. She called me out of breath like she'd sprinted a mile, right after giving Laura a long lecture and making sure my son was okay. I can only imagine what she said to her. Even my stepdad gave Laura one of his signature disapproving glares, the kind that could make a grown adult rethink their entire life. My brother came by later that evening to pick up his things. For some reason, Laura had only packed hers. He apologized for what happened and said he'd talk to her once she calmed down. According to him, she'd been crying non-stop ever since leaving my mom's place and now felt completely unwanted in our family. And of course, he blamed me for that. My husband stepped in and told him enough was enough, that Laura's feelings didn't outweigh what we had gone through and that she needed to stop acting like the victim. He pointed out that I'd been scrubbing the house from top to bottom for hours because of her stunt. Yes, I panicked a little and launched into a full deep clean, especially in the kitchen. My brother stormed out, saying we were impossible to reason with because we're both too stubborn. Now that I've calmed down, I do feel bad that Laura is hurt and feels unwelcome. That was never my intention. I'm actually considering apologizing, not for what I did because I still believe I was right, but for how I reacted. I should never have agreed to let peanut products into the house in the first place, and I definitely could have handled the fridge situation more calmly.
Update 2. A lot of people asked for a continuation, so here it is. After my mom finished tearing into Laura and my brother yelled at me and my husband, I followed the advice many of you gave me and sent them both a long message. It came out messy and emotional, but I wrote about everything, how upsetting the situation was, how much their attitude hurt us, and that we were stepping back and limiting contact until we were ready to talk again. I sent the message the day after he grabbed his luggage and left. My brother left it on read without opening it, so I figured that was the end. But a couple days later, Laura called me. I hesitated, but curiosity won. At first she tried making small talk, but when she realized I wasn't in the mood, she got to the point. She apologized. She said she had no excuse other than blaming hormones and admitted she'd acted horribly. We ended up talking for a long time, and by the end of the conversation, I actually felt relieved, like maybe we could move past this. She also told me she still wanted us to come to her birthday. The celebration wouldn't be at a restaurant anymore. They spent more than expected on the hotel, just like everyone predicted, so she'd be hosting it at their house. I told her I'd discuss it with my husband. My brother later sent a message too, apologizing and saying he'd only been trying to defend her. My husband still felt it was too soon to reconcile, but he left the final decision to me, and honestly, I believed her apology. She had never behaved like that before, and she genuinely sounded embarrassed and remorseful. My sister, whom Laura also apologized to after my sister absolutely tore into her, and my parents were invited as well. But all the kids wanted to have a cousin sleepover instead of coming with us. After talking to my sister, we agreed that's what we'd do. Our usual babysitters are 16-year-old twin girls who live next door with their single mom. They're great, responsible, sweet, and have been helping us with the kids for over a year now, whenever my husband and I go on date nights. That matters for context. Since we were adding my sister's 2 kids to the group, I asked their mom if she could help the twins that evening. She agreed. So I called Laura and told her Richard and I would attend. When we arrived at their house, Laura met us at the door. We handed her the gift and stepped inside, but she looked a bit confused that the kids weren't with us. I reminded her that it was supposed to be an adults-only evening. The same thing happened when my sister and her husband showed up. Dinner was awkward. No matter how hard we tried to ease the tension, the conversation felt stiff. Still, I thought it was progress. Then Laura asked again why the kids hadn't come. She said she'd even cooked a special dish just for them. I hadn't mentioned the kids when confirming we'd attend, so I felt guilty, apologized, and thanked her for the thought. My sister jumped in and mentioned that the kids were having a cousin sleepover tonight, and she couldn't wait until our future nephew was old enough to join them. Laura smiled and said, "Oh, I'm sure he'll be best friends with his cousins, my kids, and your stepkids." That irritated me instantly.
In our family, nobody uses words like step or half about the kids, but I held my tongue for the sake of peace. My sister technically is my stepsister. I mentioned my stepdad in my first post. I usually just call him by his name, but he's been a father figure since I was 10. My sister shot Laura an offended look, and my brother nudged his wife quietly with a face that clearly said, "What are you doing?" We ate in tense silence for a few minutes, barely keeping conversation alive, until Laura asked again about the kids, specifically who was watching them if all 4 parents were sitting at the table. I told her that our neighbors, the mom and the twin daughters, were babysitting tonight. Laura burst out laughing and joked that those girls and their mother must be so incompetent that all 3 of them could barely handle my kids. For context, I have 4 children. Maybe I'm biased, but they're well behaved, just a little too energetic sometimes for me, and I'm the one who gave birth to them. Add my sister's 2 kids on top of that, and it becomes too much for a pair of 16-year-old girls, even for just a couple of hours. We left at 7 p.m. and planned to be back by 11. It had nothing to do with the girls or their mom being bad babysitters. They're wonderful people, and my children adore them. Before I even opened my mouth, my own mother cut in. With a perfect smile, she said, "How sweet of you, Laura, to volunteer your expertise and babysit next time." Laura shut up. Dinner became even tenser after that. When we finished eating, Laura brought out dessert and my brother pulled a cake from the fridge. That's when I completely lost it. I stepped into the bathroom, and when I came back, I saw my husband holding my purse and practically dragging me out of the house. He looked furious. I was confused. Yes, dinner had been a disaster, but I still wanted to say goodbye and come up with a polite excuse. When he tried to physically push me outside, I knew something was very wrong. I pulled away from him and rushed back to the dining room. On the dessert table, the one Laura had proudly set, were peanut butter cupcakes, peanut butter pie, peanut butter cookies, peanut butter brownies, and the crown jewel, a peanut butter cake my brother had just carried in, staring at it in horror. Laura grinned and loudly announced to everyone, "It's my birthday. At least today I get to indulge myself. Help yourselves before she throws this out, too."
For a moment, I honestly thought my sister was going to attack her, and I can't say I was far from doing the same. All I could think about was how convinced Laura must be that my children would show up, and how she clearly planned this on purpose. I still felt guilty for allowing peanut products in that house the last time, and if my cousins hadn't been staying the night, my son could have been in deadly danger again. I snapped. Before I even realized what I was doing, I grabbed Laura by the head, turned her toward my brother, who looked too stunned to move, and shoved her face straight into the cake. I held her down while she flailed and said, "I hope you choke on your little indulgences," before letting go. Honestly, a part of me wanted to launch the pie at her as well, but I had already embarrassed myself enough. I told my brother I was done, with him, with his wife, with all of it. And if either of them tried contacting me or my family again, I'd file for a restraining order. My husband finally managed to get me out of the house. My sister followed with her husband while our parents stayed behind. I heard Laura screaming profanity after us, but my stepdad raised his voice, something he almost never does, and she went silent immediately. People joked in the comments of my first post about his death stare, but trust me, the man is usually calm as a stone. If he shows emotion, things have seriously gone off the rails. When we were kids, one frown from him was enough to make us understand we were in trouble. I haven't asked my mom what happened after. I can't handle another blow connected to my brother and his choices. I know this isn't the update anyone expected, but I'm done with both of them. My brother had to know. All of this happened under his roof. It breaks my heart that I won't see my nephew anymore, that my kids won't meet the cousin they were excited about, but better to grieve that than to bury my son. Don't spare me harsh words.
I'm 32. I shouldn't have been so naive. And yes, I know my reaction was wrong. I'm already talking to my therapist, trying to deal with the guilt. Please don't judge too hard. I'm still shaken. I'm also considering family therapy for my kids to help them process losing an uncle and aunt who used to be a big part of their lives. And now, we move on to the next story. Tell me in the comments, was the narrator right in the end or not? Maybe she shouldn't have snapped so badly that she shoved her sister-in-law's face into a cake. But honestly, a part of me just wants to say, well done. That was pretty much the ultimate payback she could have delivered. I overheard my girlfriend mercilessly mocking me in front of her best friend, and it was brutal. My girlfriend's name is Jenna. She's 28, and we've been together for just over 2 years. I'm 33, a veterinarian, and we first met at my clinic. She had just moved to the city and brought her dog in for an ear infection. We started talking, and what was supposed to be a 15-minute appointment turned into an hour-long conversation. I had never been so captivated by a woman before. I used to live a typical bachelor lifestyle, thinking I'd probably stay single forever. My life, full of fleeting, casual encounters, was becoming increasingly dull and empty. Jenna is charismatic, with a large circle of friends, and her best friend is a guy named Dylan, whom she's known for years. I trust Jenna, but I'd be lying if I said their friendship didn't bother me. I'm not angry with her over it, and she assured me they've been lifelong friends with no romantic involvement. I'm confident enough in myself to accept their friendship, and even tried to get along with Dylan. He visited our city 3 times. He's a good guy, but it seemed like he didn't particularly like me. Jenna says he's just protective of her, but I think it's more jealousy than actual protection. Jenna had just finished graduate school this spring and was struggling to find work. We've been living together for a year, and I understand she couldn't yet contribute to rent or other expenses. I'm financially stable, so that wasn't an issue, but I didn't want my support to become an excuse for her to avoid seeking employment. I believe everyone needs financial independence, so I made it clear she should start paying half of the expenses once she got a job. On Monday, she messaged me that she had landed a job she really wanted after a tough interview. I was so proud of her that I decided to leave work early without telling her. I bought her favorite alcohol, picked up her favorite Chinese food, and a few weeks ago, I had bought her a necklace she loved in a shop. It had a small shark pendant, and she's obsessed with anything shark-related. I hid it in the basement, planning to surprise her later when she had forgotten about it. When I got home, I went through the side entrance to the basement to grab the necklace. As I climbed the stairs and opened the door, I overheard Jenna on the phone. Normally I wouldn't eavesdrop, but she was laughing until she cried. It sounded so sweet that I decided to wait until she finished the call to surprise her. She was talking to Dylan, which wasn't unusual. They spoke at least once a week. But then I caught what she was laughing about. It took me a few moments to realize she was mocking our intimate life. She said something like, "No, he doesn't even come close to my ex. My ex was at least 8 centimeters bigger. Every time I eat a tiny carrot, I feel sorry for him. It must be traumatizing to be bitten by the same size. It would almost be cute if it weren't so terrible. He has a great body until he takes off his boxers." There was a lot of laughter. Look, I don't care what strangers online think about my size, but what she was laughing at wasn't even true, which made it even more painful. I don't know about her ex, maybe he was huge, but I'm average, plain and simple. Not exceptional, but not a joke either. I've never felt insecure about it. Hearing my girlfriend discuss me with her friend, given my existing doubts about their relationship, was beyond hurtful. She also mocked me for being handsome, but not particularly smart. I'm actually well educated, so that didn't bother me. I know I'm intelligent, good-looking, and smart, with average equipment. After hearing this, I just left. Did I throw the flowers out of my car window? Yes. Did I cry in the parking lot? Yes. I think she either heard the basement door close or saw me drive off, because she quickly started texting me, asking when I'd be back. This happened on Monday, and I haven't brought it up with her since. I'm still processing it. It's painfully awkward, but damn it, I love her. I know I need to talk to her about it, but I don't know how. Any advice on how to start that conversation? I'm deeply hurt and not sure I can forgive her. I also want to add that I'm definitely planning to break up with Jenna. Today, I met 3 friends for a beer and told them what happened. Their advice matched yours: break up and do it fast. I called my mom and told her everything too. Yes, I told her everything, even though it was embarrassing. We've always been very close, and I wanted to explain everything to her. I had never seen her so angry before. She knew that I had bought a ring for Jenna. I'll post an update once everything is settled, probably tomorrow. Emotionally, I'll be pretty shaken. Once again, thank you to everyone for the comments and support messages. I never expected so many people to take my side. Update. I finally gathered the courage and ended things with Jenna Thursday evening. Honestly, those were some of the most intense few days of my life. From Jenna's perspective, things got pretty messy. Apologies for the long post, but a lot happened. Following advice from friends, my mom, my brother, and many of you, I decided to talk to her in a public place. My reasoning was simple. Someone capable of such cruelty and dishonesty could easily twist the story, claiming I was abusive or any other nonsense. I wanted to believe she wouldn't do that, but after everything, better safe than sorry. I initially considered just packing her things and breaking up without explanation. But after 2 years together, I felt it was better to talk things through calmly and listen to her side, if she had one, even if it wouldn't change my decision to end things. I took her to a wine bar downtown that has small private booths with curtains. Since Monday, Jenna had been acting like an angel, which could mean 3 things. She felt guilty for her cruel behavior, she thought I might overhear her, or she simply noticed my distance and didn't understand why. She dressed up nicely, and I have to admit, she looked incredible despite everything. Jenna was also very affectionate and kept dropping suggestive comments about what she wanted to do with me later, usually my cute little baby carrot. Normally I'd laugh and enjoy it, but given the circumstances, it was hard to hear and stay composed. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say many times, so once we sat down and our wine arrived, I started talking. I don't remember every word because adrenaline was off the charts. I began by telling her how deeply I loved her, how she was the only woman with whom I felt such a profound connection, someone I fully opened up to and trusted. I told her she was the only one I had considered marrying, and the reason I went shopping for a ring. I didn't mention that I had already bought it, or that I had imagined us having children in the coming years. She kept interrupting with phrases like, "Oh, how sweet," or telling me how much she loved me. Then I looked her straight in the eyes and asked her bluntly, if she loved me so much, why did she mock me so terribly in front of Dylan? Her expression gave me a certain satisfaction. As expected, Jenna initially denied everything and pretended not to understand what I meant. She claimed Dylan knew how much she loved me and she never made fun of me in their conversations. I simply looked at her and said something like, "Come on, Jenna." Even after I explained that I came home early Monday and overheard everything, she continued to deny it. Her calmness was irritating. I told her we both knew she was lying, and what she said was inexcusable. I couldn't understand why she would say such things, especially since she lied just to laugh at me. She kept pretending I was imagining it. She insisted she loved me so much, was never dissatisfied with our intimate life, and would never complain about my size. She claimed she loved me for my intelligence and caring nature. Had I not heard it myself, I might have believed her. She deserves an Oscar for that performance. Some commenters asked if I was sure she was talking about me when discussing her ex and his Kraken. She did mention my name, comparing me to him. I am completely sure she was referring to me and lying straight to my face. I told her I would drive her home so she could gather essential items from the house. My brother and his wife were there too. I wanted witnesses to confirm I let her collect her things without being aggressive. I said I'd pack the rest and leave it outside for her to take at her convenience. Jenna was shocked that I was actually ending things. She begged me to reconsider, but my decision was final. It was hard to hold back tears as she expressed how much she wanted to be with me forever and that she had planned to be the mother of my children. She kept asking what she should do now and where she would sleep. I told her that was no longer my problem. and that she had plenty of friends she could stay with until she found a place of her own.
She only needed to take her clothes, toiletries, and a few personal items. Almost all furniture and decor in the house, which she had redone, had been paid for by me. And then the tears began. Jenna started crying, saying she couldn't understand how I could treat her this way. She repeated over and over that she always thought I was a good guy. I told her I am a good guy. That's exactly why I didn't throw her things on the lawn, change the locks, or leave without explanation. And then somehow she managed to twist the knife even deeper. She admitted she didn't know why she had said all those things to Dylan. Maybe it was because with him, she could laugh at things that would otherwise make her cry. Apparently, this included my penis. Normally, I don't stoop to sarcastic remarks, but I told her she was welcome to move back to her hometown and live happily with her ex and his 23-centimeter endowment. Seeing her tears vanish instantly was shocking. Clearly, in her eyes, I was a jerk, terrible with women, a failure, destined to be alone, with a tiny carrot down there. She said she never really loved me, that she saw me more as a friend and stayed to avoid hurting me. Makes sense, I guess. Then she said that if I ever proposed again, she would call me a loser and a jerk. And just in case I didn't understand, she repeated her little carrot comparison. Oh, and apparently I'm doomed to die alone. I told her that dying alone is better than dying in a marriage with a woman who doesn't love or respect me. No joke. Then she just screamed. A long, unbelievably loud scream. Not even words, just pure noise. It was terrifying. After that, she ran out, calling me a disgusting pig. I had already paid the bill and apologized to the waiter for the drama. When I stepped outside, she was just standing there, crying. Even though what she did and said was awful, it still hurt to see her like that. I didn't want to just leave her outside in the cold, so I offered to drive her home so she could gather her things, but she had to stay somewhere else afterward. She agreed. The car ride was silent, incredibly awkward. When we arrived home, my brother and his wife were there. His wife stayed inside while Jenna collected her belongings, and my brother waited with me outside. The process went relatively smoothly. I left her a note explaining that her things were on the porch and she could collect them anytime I was at work. I didn't hear from Jenna all day until it was time to come home from work. She sent a vicious message wishing me every misfortune imaginable. I didn't respond. When I got home, I found my house in complete chaos. I have no idea if she made a copy of the key or somehow knew how to pick locks, but she got inside and destroyed everything. Breakable items were smashed, furniture ripped apart, and the kitchen was ruined. The only good thing she did was lock my 2 dogs in a room, probably to keep them safe from broken glass or spilled food. I have 2 cars, one for daily use and an SUV for work, which I use for house calls or transporting large or exotic animals. Among all this chaos, I remembered that I had given her the keys to the SUV in case of emergencies. She destroyed that too. Inside, flour was scattered and tomato sauce was spilled everywhere. It's just stuff, I know, but the most shocking part was that she could act so childish and destructive after everything we'd shared. Just the weekend before, we'd gone to a show, hung out with friends, played Monopoly, made up our own drinking game, watched Netflix, and even had sex multiple times. And now, my home and car were ruined, and I was left in turmoil. In a fit of anger, I immediately ordered 22-kilogram bags of mini carrots delivered to Jenna at her friend's address. 40 kilograms of tiny carrots, within an hour. That evening, I got plenty of angry and insulting messages from her. Yes, it was petty, but I don't regret it. Aside from the wasted food, hopefully she donates or cooks with them. I blocked Jenna. She's truly cruel, and I know I deserve better. Since Monday, I've reflected a lot on myself as a partner and tried to understand what might have caused her to build up resentment or dissatisfaction toward me. To be completely honest, I work hard, I make time for everyone I love, and I try not to bring stress home. Some days at work are just brutal, and today was one of them. I'll admit it. Jen and I had argued about this before, and I genuinely tried to organize my schedule so I could come home at a reasonable hour and leave the stress of work behind.
But anyone who's a vet or knows someone in the field understands that we're always on call for emergencies. Sometimes we have patients that need constant monitoring or overnight care. Taking a day off is possible, but it's complicated. I have an incredible team that can handle most situations, yet even on days off or during vacations, I still get calls or messages. I'm sure there were moments when Jenna felt second to my work, and honestly, I know there were. She told me that herself. I tried to adjust, but there's only so much one can do. As far as I remember, I was never intentionally mean or rude to Jenna. Sure, there were bad days when I was irritated or distant, and we had arguments and disagreements, but nothing toxic or abusive. I really believed we had a strong relationship and that we were both happy. I was happy. Still, it's hard not to question yourself and wonder if I really had disappointed her or neglected her to the point that she felt so unloved that she acted out the way she did. I don't know. What I do know is that regardless of any perceived shortcomings on my part, her words and actions were completely unacceptable. I did not deserve any of it, and that's on her. A quick update, I filed a police report and took photos of the wrecked house, hoping it will help cover at least some of the damages under insurance. Honestly, I don't expect much from the police since I can't prove it was Jenna. And frankly, I don't want to see her again. I just hope the insurance covers the damages and I'll move forward with my life.
I nearly lost $900,000 during my divorce, but instead, I destroyed my cheating wife in court with shocking evidence. I work as an elementary school teacher, so my daily routine is very predictable. I have fixed hours at school, and every Tuesday we usually had staff meetings that ended around 6 p.m. That meant I normally got home by 7. My wife, Terry, whom I had been married to for over 30 years, would go to the gym every Tuesday evening. She always came back exhausted, so I usually prepared dinner while she showered and handled the house chores. But one day, my principal surprised us by canceling the meeting. It was only 3:30 p.m., and I thought it would be a great idea to head home early, cook dinner, and maybe catch up on some household tasks. Lately, I'd noticed Terry becoming more distant, and I hoped a candlelit dinner might help rekindle some spark between us. Our marriage had been strained by financial troubles, and I could feel her pulling away more and more. She wanted to control everything, and if things didn't go her way, she would become stubborn and irritable. I always thought of myself as patient, but it was starting to wear me down. When I got home, I noticed her car in the garage. That was strange, because she usually took the bus to the gym. I slipped in quietly through the back door. The first thing I saw was her purse sitting on the kitchen counter. Terry was always meticulous about where she placed her things, so this was odd. Then I noticed her workout clothes and a large towel on the floor. Just as confusion set in, I heard noises coming from upstairs. My first thought was that she might not be feeling well, so I cautiously started up the stairs. That's when I stumbled over a pair of men's shoes. Scattered on the steps were pants, a shirt, socks, and worst of all, Terry's lingerie, the kind she only wore for anniversaries or special nights. My blood ran cold. I froze on the stairs, heart pounding, stomach turning. For a moment, I thought I might faint. I sat down, trembling. Then anger began to boil inside me, an emotion I rarely allowed to take control. Years of teaching had given me patience, but this was beyond anything I could manage. I moved quietly toward the bedroom. To reach it, you had to pass through the walk-in closet. The door was cracked open just enough for me to see inside. And there it was, my wife, my partner of 3 decades, the mother of our children, betraying me in our own bed. I pulled out my phone and hit record. I knew I would need proof, not just for myself, but for the storm that was about to follow.
Watching it unfold before my eyes was like living through a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Terry, the woman who claimed to love me, who volunteered at charities, who acted like the perfect wife, was now just another liar. I couldn't watch anymore. I stopped recording, slipped out of the house, and just walked aimlessly. Eventually, I ended up in a park miles away. I sat on a bench, splashed some water on my face, and played the video back. The sound was low, so nearby kids wouldn't hear, but on that screen was the collapse of my marriage, my family, my entire life. And there in the park, I broke down and cried. By the time I got back home, it was around 7 p.m., my usual return time on meeting days. Terry greeted me at the back door with fake concern. "Do you want me to get you something to drink?" Her eyes were full of feigned worry, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. My voice shook as I muttered, "Not really. I think it's just my stomach. I'm going to take a shower and sleep it off." "All right, but take a bucket in case you throw up. I don't want to ruin the clean sheets," she said casually. That almost broke me. Those clean sheets had already been ruined, stained by betrayal. I replied more firmly, "I'll sleep in the guest room tonight." And that's exactly what I did. For the next few days, I pretended to be unwell. She went on with life as if nothing had happened, while I carried the weight of the recording in my pocket. The evidence that my marriage was nothing but ashes. When Monday came, I finally decided what to do next. I needed answers. Was this just a one-time betrayal, or had it been going on for a while? The next morning, I told the principal that I had to undergo an unexpected medical procedure and wouldn't be able to teach for a few days. A substitute was arranged, which gave me the freedom I needed. On Tuesday, I left home as usual, but parked several streets away, then walked back quietly, cutting through neighbors' yards. I knew all the back routes and moved carefully so no one would notice me. I slipped into our detached garage and changed into casual clothes and soft shoes to keep silent. Then came the waiting. I remembered that the last time I'd come home early, there hadn't been any strange cars parked outside. That meant her lover probably came on foot. I crouched behind the hedge and bushes near our front entrance, hidden but with a clear view of the door. Terry carried on her morning as if everything was normal. Washing dishes, starting the dishwasher, vacuuming, dusting. Around 11:30, she went upstairs. I heard the shower running, followed by the toilet flushing. After about 45 minutes, she came back down and left the front door slightly open, an unspoken invitation for her guest. It didn't take long. Around 12:30, he showed up. I didn't know who he was at first, but I managed to capture about 10 seconds of video on my phone. It showed his side profile and almost a clear shot of his face. He didn't hesitate, he just walked straight into my house. The first words I heard froze me in place. "I hope you're wearing that workout outfit again." "Of course," Terry replied with a giggle. "You always loved when I put it on. Sometimes I think that's what hooked you in the first place." That was all I needed. Their comfort with each other screamed of a long-term affair. They headed upstairs without a care in the world. I returned to the garage, my heart pounding out of my chest. My head was spinning with questions. Who was this man? How long had this been going on? And why hadn't she ever talked to me about anything? What terrified me more was the thought of my health. They hadn't used protection, at least not that I could see. The idea that she might have put me at risk made my stomach churn. I thought back to her years at the gym, the social circle of married women she had joined, and the charity events. Maybe the gym held the answers.
Update 1. Being a teacher came with one big advantage. I had access to printers and other resources. I decided to start by printing still frames from the video I'd taken.
Identifying him was now my top priority. On Thursday, when Terry was supposed to go to the gym again, I suggested going with her. I claimed I was thinking about getting a membership myself, especially since school was on break. She immediately grew uncomfortable and tried to talk me out of it. "It's really just a group of wives who chat more than work out," she insisted, but I didn't budge. So that Thursday, I walked into the gym with her. The moment I stepped inside, it felt like a scene from an old Western. Everyone turned to stare at me, whispering among themselves. Terry was visibly on edge, sneaking nervous glances toward the staff area. I tried to distract myself by walking around the facility. It was the usual setup, rows of machines, mirrors on the walls. Near the exit, I noticed a staff board with photos and contact info. At the top was the owner and director, Miss Elizabeth West, followed by 2 women and 1 man. My blood went cold. The man was him, the lover. Under his photo, Philip Barnes, head of training programs, personal coach. As I memorized his number, I looked back toward the machines. Terry was gone. Panic struck me until I spotted her a few minutes later in a hushed but desperate conversation with none other than Philip. She stood partly hidden behind weight equipment, gesturing for him to leave. Then she quickly returned to her machine as if nothing had happened. She didn't realize I'd seen it all. I sat there burning with rage, trying to keep my composure. When she came back over, she noticed my pale face and asked softly, "Are you okay? Is your blood sugar still low?" "I'm fine now. Are you ready to leave?" Before she could answer, the director's voice echoed through the loudspeaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, the last training session of the day is canceled. Mr. Barnes suddenly felt unwell and had to go home." A wave of disappointment swept through the women in the gym. But I wasn't disappointed. For me, it only confirmed everything. Update 2. It seemed that workouts with Mr. Bonte were a cornerstone for many women at that gym. That alone made me think this needed deeper investigation. When I glanced at Terry, she didn't show much reaction to the announcement of his sudden illness. But I could swear I saw her shoulders relax, as if a huge weight had been lifted. "Let's go," she said quickly, snatching her towel and gym bag from the storage area where everyone left their things during class. We were just stepping out when a woman approached us, someone I didn't immediately recognize. "Hello," she said nervously. "Sorry, I'm new to all this and lost track of time. My son Timothy's here, right?" That wasn't usual. New parents often struggled with pickup procedures. I reassured her I'd get Timothy while colleagues covered the remaining kids. I found him near his classroom, chatting with another student. "Hey Tim, your mom's here. Let's head to the pickup area." He looked puzzled. He was in the last year of elementary school, old enough to not lose track of time. "That's weird," he muttered. "Mom's usually busy with her fitness instructor on Friday afternoons. Back at my old school, she often didn't come until 5:30. The word fitness instructor hit me like a hammer. My heart pounded as I casually asked, "Oh, that's great she takes care of her health. Do you happen to know his name?" "Yeah, it's Bonte or something like that. He works at the local gym but also does private lessons at home. That's who I want to be when I grow up. Mom always seems so happy and relaxed after training with him. We usually order takeout on Fridays because she doesn't have time to cook." I nearly lost my composure. This man wasn't just entangled with my wife, he was messing around with multiple women in town. Back at the car, his mother thanked me warmly for helping. "Not a problem," I said smoothly, "part of the job. By the way, I don't think we've officially met. I'm Gerard D. Kids just call me Mr. D." "Nice to meet you," she replied, shaking my hand. "I'm Mary Jones. I remember seeing you at the gym last Thursday. You were there with your wife, Terry. Sorry she seemed in such a hurry to leave. It looked like Mr. Bonte's absence threw everything off." The moment she said his name, her entire demeanor shifted. She paled, her hands trembled, and she stammered, Well, Mr. D, see you later," before practically fleeing the parking lot. That sealed it. Bonte wasn't just a trainer. He was a serial predator in our community.
Update 3. It was time to think about my future. And in that vision, there was no Terry. Rage gave me clarity. I began reviewing all the small but crucial details of our shared life. The sort of things couples often overlook. Who pays which bills? Which insurance company do we use? When are utilities due? From which account do we make automatic payments? I discovered the mortgage had only a small balance left. My retirement account had grown to an impressive $900,000, thanks to mandatory contributions from our teachers' union. Our savings account, intended for an overseas vacation, held about $30,000. That trip was no longer on the table. My priority became draining it before Terry realized I knew about her betrayal. Quietly, I engineered a series of appliance breakdowns while she wasn't home. I'd unplug a cord, then claim a repairman had come to fix it, paying in cash. In reality, I pocketed the money and repaired it myself. Over time, I gathered nearly $20,000 this way. I also purchased tools and other necessities to prepare for what was coming. Update 4. I always paid cash for everything, showing the receipts to Terry, then secretly returning the items the next day. Dishonest? Absolutely. But honesty and trust had already been gutted from our marriage. Because of her actions, I was becoming a man I never thought I could be, a liar. Her Thursday daytime workouts with Bonte continued, and I no longer bothered even trying to initiate anything intimate with her. We coexisted like roommates. That was it. Quietly, I began boxing up my personal belongings, keeping them stored in the garage where Terry rarely went. Since her car usually sat outside, the garage was basically my territory, and she didn't notice my gradual disappearance. On the rare occasion she did ask about missing items, I told her they'd broken or that I didn't need them anymore. She accepted those answers mostly because many of my things didn't fit her preferred aesthetic anyway. When most of my possessions were gone and the house looked practically unchanged, I realized how much I had already surrendered to Terry's control over the years. I withdrew what I could from my retirement account and bought a small house on the edge of town. It wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms, a tiny yard, and a garage, but it was mine. Close to the school where I worked, and best of all, the mortgage was small enough that half my salary easily covered the payments. No mansion, no luxury, but solid. Amazing what you can find if you're willing to skip the glossy neighborhoods. I moved my belongings in piece by piece. Furniture wasn't a problem. Secondhand shops and donation centers were full of cheap finds. Honestly, the place reflected my own state. Used, but still standing. It was time for everyone to get what they deserved. One afternoon at school pickup, Mary Jones came over to me again. Her son Timothy was playing nearby, but I immediately noticed she looked shaken, as if she had been crying. As a teacher, you get trained to read those signs. "Mr. D, can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked, her voice wavering. "Of course. Just park over there and meet me at the benches." I always joked that those benches near the pickup zone were my office. She parked, then joined me, while Timothy kicked a ball around. She hesitated, then finally began. "I don't know how much you know about what's been happening at the gym." I kept my face steady. "I know Terry, my wife, enjoys it there. Says it keeps her in shape." She bit her lip, clearly wrestling with herself, then blurted, "There are things you need to know." I cut to the chase. "Does this have to do with Philip Bonte?" Her expression hardened instantly. "You have no idea just how much it has to do with that pig." "I can imagine. But go on." Tears welled in her eyes. "He targets women at the gym. Regulars. He watches, waits, and then pounces." I asked how she knew. She looked away, ashamed. "Because I was one of them. Until last month. We met every Friday at 12:30. Her voice faltered as though reliving it. She confessed how she had believed there could be a future with him,
Divorced, lonely, missing intimacy, Bhante had filled a void, until suddenly another woman replaced her. He dropped her cold, with nothing but a half-hearted, "Sorry, can't anymore." She gave a bitter laugh through tears. "I thought I was special. Turns out I was just another notch." I sat stunned. How could she unload this on me, her child's teacher? She must have been truly desperate. Trying to offer some comfort, I murmured, "Relationships aren't always what they seem." Her eyes narrowed, searching my face. Then she whispered, "You already know, don't you? About him and Terry?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, I know." Mary reached for my arm. "Then please believe me, he'll keep doing this until someone stops him. He doesn't care who he hurts as long as his ego's fed. He even brags about it at bars with his buddies." Her tone sharpened. "If you need my help to make him pay, just say the word. That man deserves to be brought down." She called for Timothy and drove off, leaving me in silence. I sat there, mind racing. Oddly, I felt a flicker of relief. Her confession made my plan for revenge seem less like an act of a betrayed husband and more like a moral obligation. Bhante wasn't just wrecking my life. He was a predator preying on countless women. The question now was, how many more? I started piecing together his schedule. The gym was open every day except Mondays, and he seemed to be there constantly. Using the number listed at the gym, I tracked down his address. Just 3 blocks from our house. No wonder it was so easy for him to sneak over for sessions with my wife. I told Terry that my doctor had recommended daily evening walks around 5 p.m. Luckily, she showed no interest in joining me. That gave me the perfect cover. Since I knew it wouldn't interfere with her own meetings, everything went smoothly. During my first evening walk, I headed straight to Bhante's address and discovered that he lived in a ground-floor apartment among several similar buildings. His car wasn't there, so I lingered nearby to catch his return. He usually left our house well before 6 p.m., which meant he almost always came back around that time. Sure enough, at exactly 6 p.m., he walked into his apartment. It became a routine, day after day, whenever I was free to go out. On days I had staff meetings and couldn't leave, I assumed he still followed the same pattern. I began to suspect that his evenings at the gym weren't really about exercise, but about meeting different women. To confirm this, I adjusted my schedule, starting my walks earlier and watching his daily movements more closely. Eventually, I decided to take a full week off from work just to investigate. I went to an electronics store and purchased surveillance equipment, a long-range listening device, motion-triggered HD cameras with audio, and an external hard drive for storage. On Monday, after setting everything up, I installed the first camera inside Bhante's apartment. Luckily, his place was small, almost like a studio with a kitchenette and dining space. One camera was enough to cover the entire living area, except the bedroom. Breaking in was shockingly easy. He hid his keys under the doormat. Careless. All I had to do was wait for him to head to the gym, slip inside, place the camera, and leave. From then on, every sound or movement in his apartment was recorded and streamed straight to my laptop, time-stamped and secure. That same evening, I got my first footage, Bhante eating takeout in front of the TV before heading to bed at 9 p.m. The next day, I slipped into the gym through the back entrance after closing time and set up a second camera in a private room where clients were usually assessed. This was the same room Bhante often used for one-on-one sessions. By Wednesday, when Terry went out shopping, I had already installed the third and fourth cameras, one in our bedroom and another in the living room. Reviewing Tuesday's recordings shocked me, though deep down I wasn't surprised. Bhante woke up, went out for breakfast, then came back and made a phone call. Julie, hey, it's me. He's gone. See you at 12:30. Where what I told you. Don't worry, I'll be careful. No one will see me come over. You said he's out for 3 days? Perfect. I'll come Thursday and Friday, too. We'll talk later. Love you. He hung up with a spring in his step, practically glowing. On Thursday, I set up in the garage with my laptop, waiting. As expected, the camera caught him returning with breakfast again, then calling Terry. She answered. Good thing my husband left for work. See you at 12:30, like always. That was the breaking point. Later, I asked Mary, Terry's mother, to help me compile a list of all the women Bonte had been involved with in the past. She attacked the task with energy, and within a week, I had names and addresses. To my horror, Terry's name was on that list too. At this point, our house meant nothing to me. It wasn't a home anymore, just a building. Terry noticed the emptiness, but I brushed it off by saying I was reorganizing my things. Meanwhile, I secretly prepared for the end. I met with a divorce attorney, set up new bank accounts and insurance under my name only, moved our vacation savings to my private account, and switched to a new SIM card. I even changed the beneficiaries of my retirement plan to our children. I gathered all the evidence, surveillance footage, phone transcripts, photographs. I placed it all in folders, along with the names and contact details of the women Bonte had been with. I even included the address of a local clinic for STD testing, since most of his affairs were unprotected. On our kitchen table, I left divorce papers, DVDs of their encounters, printed stills, and my wedding ring, cut in half and smeared with grime. Beside it was a note. Terry, this ruined ring is what's left of our marriage. Do not contact me. If you must, do it through the attorney listed in the documents. I've requested a restraining order at the school, so do not come there. Any disturbance will result in immediate police intervention. Our children know the truth, so don't expect to rewrite the story. Then I left. In the weeks that followed, everything fell apart for them. Word of the scandal spread quickly. The gym owner was forced to shut down and leave town. Bonte was later found beaten in an alley downtown. Divorce filings surged in our area, and several houses went up for sale. Terry came home that day, found my farewell package, and fainted on the spot. A neighbor called an ambulance. She later tried to contact me, but I ignored every attempt. Eventually, she even stormed the school, which ended in her arrest. After that, her efforts stopped. Our children didn't hold back. They confronted her openly, disgusted by her betrayal. Thankfully, they had inherited stronger values from me, not her. The divorce went through, and financial matters were settled. Terry had to sell the house and move into a smaller place on the outskirts of town. By then, she was known around the community as the gym slut. Every time she went out, whispers and mocking glances followed. Shame and depression eventually pushed her into psychiatric care. As for me, I kept teaching, rebuilt my life, and now live peacefully in my new home.